Chapter 276. The atmosphere was tense even before they started to fight. The night wind blew, and when it reached the two of them, it dispersed. Their hair fluttered gently, and their sharp eyes seemed to be able to shoot out invisible sword chi. When the sword chi collided in the air, there seemed to be endless crackling sounds, and there seemed to be sparks flying. One of them was a genius from Linshan Commandery, and it was not an exaggeration to call him the #1 genius, while the other was a genius from Chongshan Commandery, the #1 county in Chongshan State. Perhaps they were not the strongest among all the geniuses present, but they had great potential. It was not a fantasy that they could reach the 4-star level in the future. Without any intention of testing, Chiu Honglai drew out his sword. Like an anaconda lurking in the water, he stared at its prey and suddenly broke out of the water. The instantaneous speed was astonishingly fast and carried terrible power. Under the sword, the air rippled like water and spread out layer by layer, like ripples. Qin Fan's eyes were filled with the sword, and only a flash of sword light could be seen. Chen Zong's sword was like a thunderbolt across the sky, and the other was like a meteorite falling from the sky. After watching Chiu Honglie's fight, Chen Zong knew that Chiu Honglie's sword technique was extremely explosive and powerful. Now, he had a deeper feeling after seeing it. When the two swords collided, there was a strong impact at first, and then a second wave of power burst out. It was more powerful than the first wave, as if it was going to knock Chen Zong's sword away. It turned out that Chiu Honglie's sword was not only explosive, but also contained a second wave of power. It might have something to do with the cultivation method he practiced, but it might also have something to do with his sword technique. Qin Fan loosened and tightened his hand, and his arm stretched out like a spring to remove the impact of the power. He clasped the red thunder sword again, and shot out like a flash of lightning. Chiu Honglai drew out his sword again. The sword light was like a thunderbolt or a flood dragon breaking out of the water. With an astonishing roar, it rushed to Chen Zong, as if everything under the sword would be torn apart. With the dragon's roar, a flying dragon flew out as if it was riding the 9th heaven. It was Chen Zong's sword. The grand flying dragon sword. They didn't test each other's strength. Every sword strike contained terrifying power. Both Chen Zong and Chiu Honglai had shown their true strength. Chen Zong's advantage was that he had mastered a variety of swordsmanship. The changes in his style were often difficult for people to adapt to. The previous sword move was gentle, the next one was violent, and the next one was tricky. To deal with different swordsmanship, the normal way to deal with it was to adapt to the changes and use restraint. But Chiu Honglai didn't. Instead, he used his own swordsmanship, which was fast, fierce, and explosive. No matter how Chen Zong's swordsmanship changed, it was always the same style, which was to break and destroy everything with brute force. This made Chen Zong see other ways to deal with it. Practicing swordsmanship or martial arts, there was a distinction between mastery and mastery. Some people are knowledgeable but not proficient, some people are proficient but not knowledgeable, and some people are both. Chiu Honglai was proficient in mastery, and Chen Zong was both. His extraordinary comprehension allowed him to master every martial art better, especially swordsmanship, which could be practiced to the consummate realm in a short time. It was easier for him to seize the opportunity to improve to the imperceptible realm. Mastery and mastery, there was no conclusion as to which was better, because each had its own merits. Chiu Honglai took a step forward, like a big ship riding the wind and breaking the waves. With an indescribable momentum, he seemed to be able to break all obstacles. His sword was the sharp protrusion at the front of the big ship, like an awl that could pierce through everything. Before the sword arrived, Chen Zong felt a terrible pressure invading his whole body, as if his bones were going to be broken. The air behind him was compressed, as if it had formed a vacuum. Under the pressure of the sword, it was like a transparent awl, penetrating the air behind Chen Zong. It whistled and flew away, stirring up dust all over the sky. A gully was directly torn on the ground. It was as if there was 100-meter wave under the sword that was going to be penetrated and crushed. This was the same sword that Qiu Honglai had used to defeat Gu Yu and secure his victory. Now that he had used it, its power seemed to be even more powerful. In fact, Qiu Honglai did not use his full strength during the battle with Gu Yu. But now, he used his full strength, except for the secret technique, because he wanted to defeat Chen Zong. He wanted to teach Chen Zong a lesson and prove that he was better than Chen Zong. Qiu Honglai had never met Chen Zong. Logically speaking, he should not be hostile to Chen Zong, but he was. After he came to Linshan County, he heard a lot of news about Chen Zong. Some people even faintly called him the #1 genius of Linshan County. Well, Linshan County had nothing to do with Chongshan County, but some people even said that Chen Zong was the #1 genius of Chongshan State. This made Qiu Honglai unhappy and inexplicably hostile. When Yi Fifan gave Chen Zong a very high evaluation, Qiu Honglai's anger reached its peak, and his hostility became stronger. He wanted to defeat Chen Zong and crush Chen Zong in a crushing manner. Therefore, he used his full strength. Facing Qiu Honglai's sword, Chen Zong suddenly felt the pressure multiplied. His surroundings were sealed, and the omnipresent pressure pressed on him from all directions, greatly restricting Chen Zong's body and making it difficult for him to move. Space splitting cross slash. The two swords broke through the air, as if breaking the shackles, and went against the pressure. The cross-sword light was shattered, but Qiu Honglai's sword was still coming. In terms of strength, Qiu Honglai was slightly stronger than Chen Zong. He was unstoppable and merciless. Chen Zong did not hesitate and attacked again. If one attack was not enough, then two. If two attacks were not enough, then three. Chen Zong's extremely fast speed made his arms disappear, and so did the two swords in his hands. The terrible torrent of sword light disintegrated Qiu Honglai's sword. Giant shark breaking the wave. Qiu Honglai's face darkened when his sword was blocked. He released all his internal force and performed a more powerful sword attack. With a series of whistling sounds, the air behind him seemed to have turned into a vast sea, with waves surging. Qiu Honglai's face was full of ferocity, and his eyes were shining. He held the swords with both hands and chopped down fiercely. Suddenly, the sea behind him rippled as if a storm had swept past. It was as if a tsunami was approaching. A black shadow broke out of the sea. It was 7 or 8 meters long, with a ferocious appearance. Its sharp teeth seemed to be able to bite everything, and the fins on its back seemed to be able to cut everything. It was a shark, a huge shark, and it was aggressive like an overlord. Chen Zong's face changed, and he operated the origin-destroying force to the extreme. Thunderous sword aura. Mountain-breaking sword aura. Thunder splitting the sky. Flying dragon sword. Sky splitting cross slash. There was not enough time, and Chen Zong could only perform 5 sword attacks towards the giant shark breaking the wave. The sword aura shattered, the sword light dispersed, and the giant shark seemed to be broken. Qiu Honglai's sword carried a horrifying power, and it directly hit Chen Zong's 2 swords. After blocking, Chen Zong could not help but step back, and his hands were numb. At that moment, Qiu Honglai's sword exploded with 3 layers of power, one more than before. The extra attack was not only out of Chen Zong's expectation, but it was also very powerful. If it were not for his strong body, his hands would have been broken and he would have suffered internal injuries. Qiu Honglai, who performed this move, also consumed a lot of energy, and he could not perform the second move immediately. Seeing that Chen Zong was not defeated by this move, he was very surprised. He did not know that Chen Zong had broken the limits of the human body and cultivated the mixed Yuan body. His body was extremely powerful, and his defense was stronger than most people's. Unless his sword attack was more powerful, it would be difficult to cause any substantial damage to Chen Zong. Infinite sword cutting. Chen Zong said to himself, and then he drew his sword. It was so fast that it seemed to break the limit, and Chiu Honglai could not react in time. However, Chiu Honglai was an experienced fighter, and he subconsciously raised his sword to block Chen Zong's first attack, but the second attack came again. The infinite sword cutting was based on the infinite saber cutting, and it used the strength of the body and the internal force skillfully. In the beginning, it pursued the extreme speed and completely ignored the power. The second attack, on the basis of retaining the extreme speed, slightly increased the power, and so did the third attack. It could be said that every attack after that aimed to retain the original speed and increase the power. This kind of horrifying martial art, the more powerful it was, the more powerful it was. Skill? No need. Different from Jiang Baichen, Chen Zong used two swords to perform the infinite sword cutting, and his sword speed was twice as fast. The two swords kept alternating, and there was no end to them. It was more terrible than a storm. Chiu Honglai only felt that he could not breathe, and he was almost drowned by the sword light. He could only passively resist, but as the power of each attack became more and more powerful, his arms gradually became numb, and he could not bear it any more. On the side of the Silver Saber Castle, their faces were gloomy, and their eyes were full of anger and killing intent, because they all recognized that the sword art Chen Zong used was very familiar. It was Jiang Baichen's infinite saber cutting, but it was modified into the infinite sword cutting. If Yi Fifan was not here, they would definitely pull out their sabers and cut Chen Zong into pieces. Retreat, retreat, retreat. Chiu Honglai staggered as if he was drunk. His hands were numb, and his palms were cracked, and he could hardly hold the sword. Chen Zong retreated to the front of the pavilion, and then he stopped. It was clear who won and who lost. Everyone was very surprised. At first, they thought that Chen Zong might be defeated by Chiu Honglai, but the result was the opposite. Good sword art. Yi Fifan clapped his hands and smiled. Chiu Honglia's face was livid, and he was ashamed and angry. The feeling in his heart was indescribable. He wished he could dig a hole and bury himself in it. Scholar Yi, may I ask for your advice? Chen Zong was still holding the sword. He looked away from Chiu Honglia's face and fell on Yi Fifan's face. What he said surprised everyone. Chen Zong dared to challenge Yi Fifan. You overestimate yourself. Chiu Honglai seemed to have found a chance to fight back, and he immediately sneered. Indeed, in terms of strength, the current Chen Zong was far inferior to Yi Fifan. However, when Chen Zong saw Yi Fifan unleash his sword earlier, that sword strike was like a brand that could not be erased. It was as if there was a kind of magic that attracted Chen Zong. Everyone looked at Yi Fifan. Okay. Yi Fifan nodded and smiled. But I will only use my sword once, you have to be careful. Hearing Yi Fifan's words, Chen Zong's spirit, qi, and spirit were highly concentrated. The remaining chaotic heaven energy kept circulating. He squinted his eyes and his pupils contracted to the size of needles. He stared at Yi Fifan's right hand, which was the hand that would draw the sword. Chapter 277. Darkness covered the moon, the stars, the sky, the pavilions in all directions, all the people in the pavilions, and the earth under his feet. Darkness fell. Nothing could be seen or heard. It was so quiet that it made people panic. It was as if they were locked in a small dark room, and there was no answer to their cries. Suddenly, a cold light bloomed in front of them. It was so sharp that it penetrated the darkness, as if shooting out from the endless abyss. It was fast, swift, and amazing. It was a sword light, which came from Yi Fifan's hand. That sword light contained an indescribable taste, as if it symbolized a higher realm of swordsmanship, and it had a unique charm. Chen Zong was knocked back more than 10 meters by that sword light, and he had no power to resist. Today, it had been 5 days since the gathering. Chen Zong would often recall the battles at the gathering to improve himself, especially the last sword move that he had asked Yi Fifan for guidance, which he had overestimated himself. He remembered clearly that every time Chen Zong recalled the battle, he wanted to understand the mystery of that sword light. However, there seemed to be a barrier between him and that sword light. But in general, Chen Zong could feel that his swordsmanship had improved a lot in the past 5 days, and many of his swordsmanship had been upgraded to the imperceptible realm. He had a new understanding and further accumulated his swordsmanship. Chen Zong subconsciously set the direction for himself by collecting the wisdom of the masses and learning from others' strong point. Learn from all kinds of knowledge. If you have a chance, you must go out. I hope you can come to Chongshan Commandery. When you arrive, you can find me in Chongshan Mansion. Just tell me my name. That was what Yi Fifan said to Chen Zong at the end of the gathering, which was a not-so-formal invitation. Chen Zong got up and walked down the mountaineering list. He went to Mountain View residence to greet his master, Marquis Linshan, and ask some questions about cultivation. After getting the answer, Chen Zong left Mountain View residence and went back to the mountaineering list. While walking, Chen Zong suddenly stopped and stared at the mountaineering list as if he felt something. The name was very strange, but it was a mountain. The mountain was 999 meters tall and stood behind the courtyard. There was only one mountain in all directions and nothing else. Therefore, the mountaineering list was very prominent. Lonely Mountain. For no reason, a thought flashed through Chen Zong's mind. It was as if he wanted to grasp something, but he couldn't. Little Lonely Mountain, Little Lonely Mountain, Little Lonely Mountain. The inspiration became clearer and stronger, and there was an urge to gush out. Little Lonely Mountain visualization. Chen Zong had been cultivating ever since he got it. He wanted to comprehend it as soon as possible. If he could comprehend it, his realm would be higher, and his combat strength would be greatly improved. However, it had already been 20 days, but he still couldn't find the door, and couldn't find the feeling. Chen Zong also knew that it would not be easy to practice the visualization skill on Little Lonely Mountain, so he had prepared himself for a long time. However, when he came back and saw the mountaineering list, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. It was a rare opportunity. Chen Zong abandoned all distracting thoughts and carefully searched for the inspiration. His eyes seemed to be absent-minded, reflecting the mountaineering list. Using the body as a mountain, sensing heaven and earth, Lonely Mountain. There is only one mountaineering list, and it is Lonely Mountain. Chen Zong's inspiration erupted like a surging tide. However, he also knew that this was not a suitable place for him to comprehend. He immediately executed his movement technique and ascended the mountain at an astonishing speed. He returned to the 89th level and sat down cross-legged on a relatively flat surface, directly touching the mountaineering list. Sitting cross-legged, he followed the feeling just now and carefully meditated. Using the body as a mountain. The Little Lonely Mountain visualization was to imagine oneself as a mountain, a lonely mountain, standing on the earth and proudly under the sky. It was the only one. A person was a person, a mountain was a mountain, and using the body as a mountain was like a change in form. It was very difficult. Fortunately, the Little Lonely Mountain visualization didn't make a person become a mountain, but imagine himself as a mountain from the spiritual level. Otherwise, no one could do it. Even if it was only on the spiritual level, it was very difficult. Following his feelings, Chen Zong gradually gained enlightenment. He forgot about everything around him, forgot about this world, and even gradually forgot about himself. In the dark, he didn't know how much time had passed. Chen Zong was motionless, as if he had fallen asleep or turned into a wooden man. Unknowingly, the sun was setting in the west, and the red clouds were setting. Chen Zong was wearing a red robe, and his face seemed to be full of divine light. Night fell, and the crescent moon rose in the sky. The night wind blew gently, making Chen Zong's hair and clothes flutter. But he still closed his eyes and didn't move at all. Gradually, even his breathing became long and difficult to feel. The moon was in the middle of the sky, and the clouds drifted, blocking the moonlight. The world was dark. The moon set and the sun rose. A new day had come. Chernzong was still sitting cross-legged. Day after day, 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Chernzong was still sitting, and the maids who took care of his daily life didn't dare to disturb him. As maids on the mountaineering list, they all had some cultivation and corresponding martial arts knowledge. They knew that Chernzong was in a state of cultivation and couldn't be disturbed. On the contrary, they had to do their best to protect him. The 4th day passed, and Chernzong was still covered in dust. Guan Yunxi came and saw Chernzong's state. She also knew that Chernzong was in a state of enlightenment, so she stayed aside. On the 5th day, a bird came from afar and landed on Chernzong's shoulder. It jumped around lightly, as if treating Chernzong as a rock. "What is junior brother cultivating?" Guan Yunxi was surprised. Birds were naturally alert and would be frightened by the slightest movement. Under normal circumstances, birds couldn't get close to people, let alone land on them. After all, martial artists who had cultivated in the qi and blood realm had powerful qi and blood that could intimidate tigers and leopards, let alone a bird. But at this moment 2 more birds flew over. A total of 3 birds played on Chernzong's body, as if Chernzong was a tree or a rock. It was a strange feeling. In the past, Chernzong didn't emit any aura waves, but people could still sense the natural waves of his body. But now it felt different. Although he was alive, he seemed to have no vitality. It was very strange, like a wood or a rock. Guan Yunxi, who was confused and a little panicked, could only instruct the maids to keep an eye on him. She quickly left and returned to the Mountain View residence to find Marquis Linshan. Yan Wei also came with him. When they saw Chernzong, both Marquis Linshan and Yan Wei's eyes lit up. Then, it was an indescribable surprise. "Good boy." Marquis Linshan couldn't help laughing. "Congratulations, Marquis." Yan Wei smiled again, also very excited. "Father, Uncle Wei, what's going on?" Guan Yunxi didn't know what was going on, but she could clearly see the expressions of the Marquis and Yan Wei. Therefore, she guessed that it wasn't anything bad and asked curiously. "Your junior brother is practicing the Lonely Mountain visualization technique." Marquis Linshan smiled. Guan Yunxi also knew about this technique. She could also start practicing it after her essence, energy, and spirit reached perfection, but she was still a little far away. Guan Yunxi also knew that Chernzong was practicing the Lonely Mountain visualization technique. She also knew how difficult it was. She didn't expect that in just over 20 days, this junior brother of hers was about to achieve something. "Wei, do you remember what's the shortest time from coming in contact with the truth-comprehending technique in our dynasty?" Marquis Linshan suddenly asked. "Half a year." Yan Wei answered without thinking. This was a secret among ordinary cultivators, but it was widely spread among cultivators who had already comprehended the truth-comprehending technique. Half a year to comprehend the truth-comprehending technique. A heaven-sent genius. I originally thought that no one could surpass him, but who would have thought? Marquis Linshan couldn't help but smile, but he held back the urge to laugh out loud for fear of disturbing Chernzong. Less than a month to comprehend the truth-comprehending technique. Yan Wei also smiled from the bottom of his heart. "Congratulations, Marquis, for obtaining such a good disciple." When Guan Yunxi heard that, she was so shocked that she felt dizzy. "Wei, stay here. Don't let anyone disturb Chernzong," Marquis Linshan ordered. "Rest assured, Marquis," Yan Wei promised. After standing for a while, Marquis Linshan turned and left with a smile on his face. Marquis Linshan's biggest goal was naturally to break through and become a transcendent realm master, but it was too difficult. He had worked hard for many years, but he couldn't find a way. If he didn't have enough opportunities, he might not be able to break through in his lifetime. Now that he had received an outstanding disciple, according to Chernzong's performance, The possibility of him reaching the transcendent realm in the future was not small. To a certain extent, he had fulfilled his wish. Of course, if his disciple had enough ability, he might be able to help him reach the transcendent realm. No matter what, it was a dream come true to receive such an outstanding disciple. Chen Zong didn't know that Marquis Linshan had come and gone. He didn't have any perception. At this moment, it was as if he was drifting in the endless darkness. On the 6th day, Chen Zong's body began to emit an inexplicable aura. It was the same as the mountain under his feet, as if the two were about to merge into one. He's about to comprehend the truth comprehending technique. Yen Wei nodded secretly and gradually relaxed. He, who had cultivated the little lonely mountain visualization technique, was very clear about this feeling. Using the body as a mountain. I am a mountain. In the endless darkness, a voice seemed to ring out. At first, it was very weak, but it gradually spread out, becoming more and more powerful. In the end, it was like a tsunami or thunder, resounding in the endless darkness, reverberating endlessly. In the darkness, a ray of light appeared and gradually grew bigger. In the light, there was an illusory image of a small mountain, which was slowly solidifying as time passed. In the end, the small mountain seemed to have materialized, as if it was a real mountain. It stood alone in the darkness, as if it was detached from the world. The wind and clouds changed, the sea turned into mulberry fields, and the darkness seemed to recede. The sky filled the sky and the earth appeared, as if the world was being created. After an unknown amount of time, a 10,000-kilometer wide land completely appeared. On the land stood a lonely mountain, and above the mountain was a cloudless sky. Heaven and earth, one side of the world. However, the edge of this world was still dark, as if it was broken and filled with an indescribable power. Chapter 278. Cultivators were much more efficient than ordinary people. In just half a day, a high platform had been built in the wide martial field of overlooking mountain courtyard. Decorations were also carried out all around, making it look like a grand venue. Although the layout of the venue was simple, it gave off a grand feeling. At the front of the venue, a large red curtain was opened, as if covering the sky. Above it were 4 large golden words, Disciple Acceptance Ceremony. These 4 words constantly exuded a majestic aura, like an invisible mountain. They were written by the Marquis of Overlooking Mountain. In addition to being a pseudo-transcendent realm master, the Marquis of Overlooking Mountain was also a calligraphy master. At the entrance of Overlooking Mountain courtyard, neatly dressed young men and women were lined up on both sides to welcome the guests. Since the Marquis of Overlooking Mountain was accepting a disciple, all the influential people of Overlooking Mountain County had come to give face. Those who were a little further away had already entered Overlooking Mountain City a day in advance, waiting for the disciple acceptance ceremony to begin. There were many people gathered outside Overlooking Mountain courtyard, most of them here to watch. Not long after, someone walked out of the crowd and strode towards the entrance of Overlooking Mountain courtyard. After reporting their identity, they passed through the reception door and entered Overlooking Mountain courtyard. That's the Yang family's patriarch. That's right, it's the Yang family's patriarch and the Wang family's patriarch. The Yang family and the Wang family were all forces of Overlooking Mountain City. Although they weren't weak, they couldn't compare to the Marquis of Overlooking Mountain. Since the Marquis of Overlooking Mountain's disciple acceptance ceremony was so close, they had to come early. Otherwise, if they were targeted, it wouldn't be a good thing. The various forces of Overlooking Mountain City arrived one after another, and Zhuge Men of the Giant Gate Carriage Company was no exception. When they entered Overlooking Mountain courtyard, Zhuge Men's face was filled with emotion. That day, he had tried to recruit Chen Zong into the Giant Gate Carriage Company to repay a favor. Now that he thought about it, he felt a little ashamed, but more than that, he was shocked. If the Marquis of Overlooking Mountain accepted him as a disciple, his future achievements would surpass his by countless times. In Overlooking Mountain City, there were several dozen forces that were considered top forces, and even more that weren't. Of course, unranked forces were not qualified to participate in this ceremony, even though they wanted to. At this moment there was a commotion in the crowd. A group of people wearing robes of various colors and carrying long sabers walked over. The person in the lead was a middle-aged man. His face was filled with determination, and he gave people a strong feeling of power. He walked like a dragon or a tiger, and he walked like the wind, as if there was a boundless sharpness contained within. Behind the middle-aged man, there were a few old men who also carried long sabers on their back. Their backs were straight, and their gazes were as sharp as blades. Then, there was a group of young people in silver robes. There were both men and women, and they looked very neat. They seemed to be from the Silver Saber Castle. That's right, they are from the Silver Saber Castle. Could it be that the leader of the Silver Saber Castle is the Castle Lord? As soon as he said that, everyone was shocked. The Silver Saber Castle's Fort Lord, although not as powerful as the Marquis of Mountain Facing, was still a famous figure in Mountain Facing County. Together with the proud Sword Villa's Manor Lord, they were known as the strongest true martial realm masters in Mountain Facing County. Of course, pseudo-transcendents also belonged to the true martial realm, but there was a clear distinction between them. It could be said that in Mountain Facing County, the Silver Saber Castle's Fort Lord's prestige was very high. Why do I feel that they have come with ill intentions? Someone in the crowd whispered. Regardless, the news that the Silver Saber Castle's Fort Lord had come with a few elders and a group of disciples was immediately spread to many people, and they were all very excited. Fort Lord Situ. After the Silver Saber Castle's Fort Lord walked into the mountain-facing courtyard's disciple recruitment ceremony, many people stood up to greet him. They were all forces that were not as strong as the Silver Saber Castle, and even if they were not on good terms with the Silver Saber Castle, they still could not offend them. Facing everyone's greetings, Situ Jean only nodded his head in response. However, no one was angry, as they felt that he was being rude. There was no other way, as strength and status determined everything. The Silver Saber Castle was one of the three great forces in Mountain Facing County. Situ Jean was the strongest true martial realm master, and he was also the Fort Lord of the Silver Saber Castle. The Marquis of Mountain Facing County had not appeared yet, and neither had Chen Zong, but they had arranged for people from the Marquis Mansion to be in charge of receiving them. The Silver Saber Castle's Fort Lord, Situ Jean, had his own seat, which was above most of the seats. Not long after, another group of people appeared outside. The leader was also a middle-aged man, but he had a long sword on his back. Following him were a few elders and some young people with long swords on their back. It's the proud Sword Villa's people. I see them. The proud Sword Villa's people are also here. That must be the proud Sword Villa's Fort Lord. What a sharp gaze, I feel like I have been pierced by a sword. Everyone was extremely excited. The proud Sword Villa's people also walked into the venue, and many people's gazes landed on them. Fort Lord Situ, long time no see. The proud Sword Villa's Fort Lord's gaze swept across the crowd, and landed on the Silver Saber Castle's Fort Lord, Situ Jean's face. A sharp light flashed in his eyes, and it was as if a sharp sword had been unsheathed. Fort Lord Duan, I trust you have been well since we last met. Situ Jean's gaze was as if a long saber had been unsheathed, and it shot towards Fort Lord Duan. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines, and it was as if their surroundings were filled with saber light and sword shadows. It was so cold that they could not sit still. Especially when the gazes of the two true martial layer experts clashed, it seemed as if there were sabers and swords clashing. An invisible sharp light flashed past them, and it was as if they were being cut by sabers and swords. The Silver Saber Castle and the proud Sword Villa were not mortal enemies, but they had been rivals for a long time. The battle between sabers and swords had never stopped. Especially before the mountain-facing courtyard was built, there were only two powerful forces in the entire mountain-facing county, and they were the Silver Saber Castle and the Proud Sword Villa. The competition between them was even more intense. For example, when Situjan was young, he had fought with Duan Zhixing many times. They were old rivals, and after many years, they were evenly matched. In the past, whenever they saw each other, they would pull out their sabers and swords. However, after becoming the Fort Lord and Fort Lord, the two of them paid more attention to the occasion, and their statuses were different. Although they would not pull out their sabers and swords like in the past, the exchange of words and glances was inevitable. Fortunately, they also knew where they were. Therefore, after a brief exchange, they retracted their gazes. Duan Zhixing acted as if nothing had happened, and sat down on a seat parallel to Situjan. He had a smile on his face, and nodded in response to the greetings of the other forces. Immediately, everyone felt flattered. His attitude was much better than Situjan's. Putting on an act. Situjan was secretly disdainful. This Marquis Disciple Acceptance Ceremony, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend. Your presence brings light to my humble dwelling. A majestic voice sounded. The main character had arrived. The Marquis of Linshan, Yen Wei, Guan Yunxi, and Chen Zong strode over. Greetings to the Marquis. It is our honor to attend the Marquis Disciple Acceptance Ceremony. That's right, that's right. You should know that many people want to attend, but don't have the honor. One by one, the leaders of the forces hurriedly stood up and complimented him. Even the Lord of the Silver Saber Fort, Situjan, and the Lord of the Proud Sword Villa, Duan Zhixing, stood up. However, they did not offer any compliment. Instead, they bowed to the Marquis of Linshan. Regardless of status or strength, they had to bow to him. Everyone, please be at ease. The Marquis of Linshan chuckled. He was in a good mood. Everyone's gaze swept over and finally landed on Chen Zong's face. It was as if they wanted to see through Chen Zong. They could guess that this person should be the disciple that the Marquis of Linshan wanted to take as his disciple. Situjan and Duan Zhixing stared at Chen Zong. Their gazes were as sharp as swords, as if they wanted to see through Chen Zong. Of course, in front of the Marquis of Linshan, they did not dare to go too far. They just watched. They had already heard about the gathering from their disciples, and they were further aware of Chen Zong's terrifying potential. In the future, it would not be a problem for him to be ranked on the Jiao Dragon list. If he became a warrior of the real martial arts realm, he would become a powerful figure among the real martial arts realm warriors. Whether it was Situjan or Duan Zhixing, their limit when they were in the Qi refining realm was the 3-star limit. Both of them could not help but feel bitter in their hearts. They had been suppressed by the Marquis of Linshan. Now, was the disciple of the Marquis of Linshan going to suppress their disciples as well? The disciples of the Silver Saber Castle stared at Chen Zong with hatred, while the disciples of the Aojin Villa were curious and eager to fight. Chen Zong was not afraid of everyone's gazes. He looked straight at them. When he saw Zhuge Men, he immediately smiled and bowed. Senior Zhuge. No need for formalities, no need for formalities. The Zhuge Men's faces were flushed red, and they were grinning from ear to ear. They were so proud. He was still wondering if Chen Zongfei would pretend not to know him after his meteoric rise. Now, it seemed that he had worried too much. Chen Zongfei was a person who understood kindness. He felt that the specially recruited token was not wasted. The leaders of the other forces looked at Zhuge Men with envy. They all secretly thought that perhaps they should establish a better relationship with Zhuge Men. After all, the disciple of the Marquis of Linshan had a different identity. Moreover, it seemed that the Marquis of Linshan had a friendly relationship with Zhuge Men. As leaders of forces, they were not hotheads. It was enough to have cultivation and strength. They also needed to consider other aspects. Otherwise, their forces would have been swallowed up by others long ago. The main seat in the venue was naturally the seat of the Marquis of Linshan. Chunzong, Yanwei, and Chunzong were arranged to sit on either side of the Marquis of Linshan. When the Marquis of Linshan sat down, all the voices fell silent. They all knew that the disciple recruitment ceremony was about to begin. Worship the heavens. The Marquis of Linshan's voice was as powerful as thunder. Everyone looked solemn. The ground shook slightly. The sound of orderly footsteps could be heard. Dust flew up. From a corner of the courtyard, a group of armored soldiers were carrying a huge figure. What demonic beast is that? It looks like a black saber tiger dragon. What, a black saber tiger dragon? Everyone was shocked. Even Situ Zhan and Duan Zhixing were the same. The black saber tiger dragon was an extremely terrifying demonic beast. It belonged to the LV9 true martial realm. Most LV9 true martial realm martial artists were not its match. Although Situ Zhan and Duan Zhixing were confident that they could kill it, killing it and capturing it alive were two different concepts. Chapter 279. Sacrificing monster beasts to the heavens originated from ancient times. It was a custom and a symbol. It wasn't clear whether sacrificing to the heavens would allow one to sense the heavens. Perhaps it could, perhaps it couldn't. However, this custom hadn't changed and wouldn't change. It represented a major event with great significance. It was said that the stronger the monster beast used to sacrifice to the heavens, the better the effect. The Black Blade Tiger Flood Dragon was a powerful monster beast. It was a powerful monster beast that could only be captured alive by the Marquis himself. At this moment, the soldiers carrying the bound Black Blade Tiger Flood Dragon were all Marquis Linshan's personal guards. They were at least at the true martial realm intermediate stage. The Black Blade Tiger Flood Dragon's throat was cut open and blood was released. The Black Blade Tiger Flood Dragon struggled desperately but couldn't break free. It could only become weaker and weaker. The thick smell of blood permeated the surroundings. The scarlet color was shockingly thick and quickly flowed through the lines on the altar, dyeing them red. Everyone looked solemn. Sacrificing to the heavens was a very important ceremony that couldn't be disturbed. The Marquis of Linshan carried Chen Zongru and flew up with the wind, landing on the altar. He looked up at the sky and opened his arms. The blood-red color on the altar flew up, as if it was rising into the air like mist. It circled around the Marquis of Linshan and continued to surge into the sky. In the sky, it formed the shadow of the Black Blade Tiger Dragon. Following that, he began to recite an incomprehensible and mysterious funeral oration. Even though he couldn't hear it, there was a rhythm to it, as if he was chanting. With the heavens as my witness and the earth as my witness, I, the Marquis of Mountain Face, am here today to take Chen Zong as my disciple. The Marquis of Mountain Face's voice was solemn and dignified, resounding in all directions and reverberating without end. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The sky was clear and bright, but there was the sound of rolling thunder, as if it was a response to Marquis Linshan's words. On the altar, Chen Zong kowtowed to Marquis Linshan. Ha 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 ha, get up, my good disciple. Marquis Linshan laughed and reached out to help Chen Zong up. Marquis Linshan was satisfied with Chen Zong from the bottom of his heart, beyond his limit. Throughout the history of the Cloud Dragon dynasty, no one had been able to enter the Enlightenment realm in just a month. It represented endless potential and limitless possibilities in the future. A disciple who had great hopes of reaching the transcendent realm in the future, what could be more satisfying than this? After the ceremony ended, the Marquis of Linshan brought Chen Zong back to his seat. Fine wine and delicacies were served. Everyone who came gave gifts, but they were all common gifts, such as spirit shells, weapons, etc., which had long been registered by the people of the Marquis mansion. The rest of the time was relatively free time. Everyone could talk loudly here, and the younger generation could also exchange pointers to liven things up. Marquis, can we begin? The Lord of the Silver Saber Castle, Situzhan, suddenly spoke. His sharp gaze swept past Chenzong and landed on the Marquis of Linshan's face. Everyone was confused. Duan Zhixing was deep in thought, but he couldn't think of anything. Only Situzhan, the Marquis of Linshan, and Chenzong knew what was going on. Gambling battle. That's right, Situzhan had already looked for the Marquis of Linshan a long time ago and proposed a bet. The opponents of the bet were naturally the number one on the Silver Saber Castle's Mad Saber list, Situzhan's disciple, Yang Tianzhao, and the Marquis of Linshan's disciple, Chenzong. The wager was naturally the peerless earth-level martial art, the chaotic heaven energy-breaking art. However, the Silver Blade Castle had to take out a sufficient wager as well. A peerless earth-level martial art was extremely valuable. Therefore, the Silver Blade Castle had no choice but to take out a treasure, the Mingguang treasure armor. According to the Marquis of Linshan, the radiant armor was a pseudo-spirit artifact. What was a pseudo-spirit artifact? Chenzong didn't know at first, and only understood after the Marquis of Linshan's explanation. In the world of cultivators, weapons and armors were divided into two major levels. The first major level corresponded to the ordinary level. For example, the two swords used by Chenzong belonged to the first major level. The so-called ordinary iron weapons, fine iron weapons, and even divine iron weapons were the same. The second major level was spirit artifacts. According to their classification, there were spirit weapons, spirit armors, spirit treasures, and so on. To put it simply, spirit artifacts corresponded to the Transcendence realm. Only Transcendence realm masters could truly use spirit artifacts and display the power of a spirit artifact. After many years, with the efforts of many artifact refiners, a method was found to allow cultivators below the Transcendence realm to use the additional power of weapons. That was the pseudo-spirit artifact. A pseudo-spirit artifact was beyond ordinary weapons. It possessed a portion of the power of a spirit artifact, but it couldn't be compared to a spirit artifact. As long as one was a true martial realm cultivator, it would be easier for them to use the power contained in a pseudo-spirit artifact to improve themselves. Cultivators in the energy refining realm could also do it, but it was more difficult. The value of a pseudo-spirit artifact was very high, and most people couldn't obtain it. The Radiant Armor was one of the only two pseudo-spirit artifacts in the Silver Saber Castle. If it weren't for the peerless Earth-grade Heaven Chaotic Yuan breaking technique, and if it weren't for the Marquis of Linshan's strength and status, the Silver Saber Castle wouldn't be willing to use the Radiant Armor as a bet. If they lost, they would suffer heavy losses. But there was no other way. For the peerless Earth-grade Heaven Chaotic Yuan breaking technique, they had to take the risk. The cost and the benefits were often proportional. To gain something without risking anything, it depended on the target. Of course. The Marquis of Linshan smiled. If it was before, he might be worried that Chenzong might lose. But now, the Marquis of Linshan was full of confidence. The Silver Saber Castle's radiant armor seemed to be recruiting. Even with the Marquis of Linshan's status, he couldn't ignore the value of a pseudo-spirit artifact. Seeing the smile on the Marquis of Linshan's face, Situzhan didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a little cold. He had a bad feeling, but since things had come to this, there was no way out. He could only hope that his disciple could defeat Chenzong. Thinking of his disciple, a trace of a smile flashed in Situzhan's eyes. After a month of wholehearted teaching, his disciple might not be able to reach the 4-star level, but at the 3-star level, it was definitely the limit. As long as Chenzong didn't have the strength of a 4-star, he wouldn't be a match for him. After the Marquis of Linshan agreed, the young man behind Situzhan took a step forward. His originally clear and calm eyes suddenly flashed with a sharp light. It was like a long blade being unsheathed, and it was shockingly sharp. It pierced through the air and shot towards Chenzong. Chunzong looked over without fear. The invisible sharpness collided in the air. Everyone was looking forward to it because it would be a fierce battle. And this was also the time for them to see the strength of the Marquis of Lin Shan's disciple. A young man stood behind the manor lord of Proud Sword Villa, Duan Jixing. His gaze was as sharp as a sword, and his entire body exuded an aura that belonged to the sword. He was Duan Jixing's son, and also the number 1 person on the Proud Sword list of Proud Sword Villa, Duan Qinjian. Duan Qinjian and Yang Tianzhao could be considered old rivals. As for Chunzong, it was his first time seeing him, so he was very curious. Ha 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 ha, Marquis of Linshan, you didn't even inform me about such a big event like the disciple recruitment ceremony. A somewhat boorish laugh suddenly rang out. It was very abrupt, like the ringing of a large bell, interrupting the confrontation between Chunzong and Yang Tianzhao. It also attracted everyone's attention. The Marquis of Lin Shan frowned slightly, seemingly displeased. Uninvited guest. 2 people appeared at the gate of Lin Shan courtyard. One of them was tall and burly like a small mountain. He was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. His strong body constantly exuded an astonishing pressure. Every move he made seemed to be pushing the surrounding air away. When he walked, there was a whistling sound. Everyone's pupils shrank, especially Situ Zhan and Duan Jixing. They could feel it more clearly. This was a master who could threaten their lives. At the very least, he was a pseudo-transcendent realm master. As for a transcendent realm master, that was impossible because a transcendent realm master would not appear at will, even if it was a disciple recruitment ceremony. Unless the Marquis of Lin Shan was also a transcendent realm master. As for the young man following beside him, although he was also very eye-catching, he was ignored for a moment. After all, if one was not a pseudo-transcendent realm master, it was impossible to steal the limelight from a pseudo-transcendent realm master. Marquis Lin Shan, why aren't you in your Lin Shan county? What are you doing here? The Marquis of Lin Shan did not get up. His voice was neither fast nor slow, but when it fell into everyone's ears, it was like a thunderclap. Marquis Lin Shan County. The identity of this extremely strong pseudo-transcendent realm master was obvious. A marquis of the same status as the Marquis of Lin Shan. Everyone hurriedly got up and bowed. There was no other way. This was a dynasty. The position of a marquis was very high and he had a lot of power. You accepting a disciple is such a big event. No matter what, I have to make time for it. Marquis Lin Shan chuckled. It sounded like an old friend coming to give his blessings, but everyone could hear the malicious intent in his laughter. Yes, Lin Shan County and Wu Shan County were neighbors. Marquis Lin Shan and Wu Shan County were not good friends. In fact, they were old rivals with similar strength. It was impossible to say who was stronger or weaker, but they would compete with each other. They could not kill or injure each other, but it was always possible to make the other lose face. This time, the purpose of Marquis Lin Shan's visit was to slap the face of the Marquis of Lin Shan. The way to slap the face naturally fell on Chunzong. Coincidentally, a few months ago, I accepted a disciple. Here, it's him. Marquis Wu Shan pointed to the young man standing beside him. His eyes were arrogant, and the deepest impression he gave was his pair of arms. They were very long, like the arms of an ape. He's called Fei Yuan. His strength is not bad. Fei Yuan's arrogant eyes swept across and landed on Chunzong's face. The corners of his mouth curled up provocatively. How about it, Marquis of Lin Shan? Let my disciple fight with your disciple. Marquis Wu Shan laughed. In his perception, Marquis Wu Shan's disciple Fei Yuan's cultivation was at the middle stage of the 9th transformation realm. As for his combat strength, he did not know. After all, it was difficult to make an accurate judgment without fighting. As soon as Marquis Wu Shan's words left his mouth, it immediately became a little subtle. The battle between Yang Tianzhao and Chen Zong from the Silver Saber Fort had not started yet, but two unexpected guests, Marquis Wu Shan and his disciple Fei Yuan, had appeared. So now, who was going to fight who? Chapter 280. Marquis Lin Shan frowned slightly. That sharp and cold voice sounded a little familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before. Soon after, when two black shadows passed over the walls of the courtyard like black clouds and floated over, the Marquis of Linshan's expression changed. He finally remembered. You actually dare to come to this Marquis place. Marquis Linshan was furious. This person was the pseudo-transcendent from Demon Wind Hall who had fought with him not long ago. In this world, is there any place that I, Yin Luoxing, don't dare to go? The leading black-robed man laughed strangely. Since you're here, don't even think about returning to Demon Wind Hall alive. Marquis Lin Shan sneered as his eyes emitted a sharp killing intent. Everyone was shocked. Demon Wind Hall. These three words were very sensitive and immediately alerted everyone. Their eyes were sharp and carried a bit of killing intent. Demon Wind Hall had been causing trouble everywhere and now they actually dared to appear here so brazenly. They were simply too arrogant. Marquis Wu Shan also widened his eyes and shot out a sharp killing intent, locking onto the black-robed man, Yin Luoxing. Since I dared to come, I'm confident that I can escape unscathed. You can't stop me. Yin Luoxing laughed. It sounded very unpleasant, but it was the truth. In front of a pseudo-transcendent, even dozens of true martial realm cultivators couldn't do anything to them. They could come and go as they pleased. Pseudo-transcendents might be able to defeat them, but it was extremely difficult to kill them. Even if two pseudo-transcendents joined forces, they would at most pay a small price if they wanted to escape. This was also the reason why Marquis Lin Shan didn't directly attack. He had fought with this person before and both sides were injured. What's your purpose? Marquis Lin Shan calmed himself down. As expected of a marquis. Yin Luoxing laughed strangely. It sounded like praise and sarcasm. It's very simple. I've brought my disciple here to have a gambling match with your disciple. Gambling match? Marquis Lin Shan was puzzled. Gambling match? Sidu Zhan and the others from Silver Saber Castle were secretly shocked. They thought that the people from Demon Wind Hall were also here to compete for the peerless Earth-grade cultivation technique. Everyone was even more astonished. Another person had come for the Marquis of Linshan's new disciple. Chen Zong felt helpless. He had become the target once again. A cold and sharp gaze pierced through the black robe and fell on Chen Zong. Chen Zong looked over, but he could not clearly see the figure under the black robe. My disciple's cultivation is still weak. His battle prowess is only at the 3-star level. Marquis Linshan frowned slightly. He couldn't figure out what the demonic Wind Hall was up to. My disciple's combat strength doesn't exceed 3 stars. Yin Luoxing specially explained, if my disciple wins, the Celestial Mountain will belong to my Demon Wind Hall. You, Marquis of Mountain Face, cannot interfere in any way. If your disciple wins, the Demon Wind Hall will never take half a step into Mountain Face County. They only said that the Marquis of Mountain Face could not interfere and did not mention other powers. Firstly, it was because the Mountain Face County was under the jurisdiction of the Marquis of Mountain Face, and only the Marquis of Mountain Face had this right. Secondly, even if other powers wanted to interfere, the Magic Wind Hall would not care. The stakes of this bet were not small. If they lost, the Magic Wind Hall would openly enter Mountain Face County to develop and expand. They would plunder the territory of Mountain Face County and embezzle its resources. This was not a good thing for any of the powers in Mountain Face County. However, although the current Magic Wind Hall had not developed and expanded in Mountain Face County, they were plundering everywhere and had caused quite a bit of influence. However, they did not know where they were and were not easy to deal with. If they won, the magic Wind Hall would completely withdraw from Mountain Face County and never take half a step in again. It would not affect the other powers. Whether it was the benefits or the disadvantages, they were very direct and obvious. The Marquis of Mountain Face did not answer immediately. He was weighing the pros and cons. The significance of this bet was different from that of the Silver Saber Castle. He had to treat it seriously. Yin Luoxing did not rush him. He waited quietly, emitting traces of gloomy coldness. Marquis Wushan also stood to the side and did not speak. Although he was not on good terms with the Marquis of Mountain Face, he knew very well what to do in this situation. If not for the fact that he was not confident, he would have killed the black-robed man long ago. However, it was now up to the Marquis of Mountain Face's choice. Many gazes fell on the Marquis of Mountain Face, causing him to feel a kind of pressure. It was as if his shoulders had become much heavier. "Of course, you can also choose to attack me." Yin Luoxing suddenly smiled. He was not afraid at all. Since he dared to come here, he was confident that he could escape unscathed. "Master, it's up to you." Sensing the gaze of the Marquis of Mountain Face, Chen Zong bowed and said, "In that case, let's fight." The Marquis of Mountain Face made the decision. "Marquis is so bold." Yin Luoxing laughed strangely. "Wait a moment." Duan Zhixing suddenly spoke. He stood up and bowed to the Marquis of Mountain Face. "Marquis, this is a matter of great importance. My proud sword manor is willing to contribute. Please allow my son to make the first move." "Hee, are you guys planning to take turns or join forces?" Yin Luoxing's words were full of mockery, causing others to blush. "Thank you, Manor Master Duan. However, Chen Zong can fight this battle," the Marquis of Mountain Face said. In the end, Yin Luoxing proposed a battle between his disciple and the Marquis of Mountain Face's disciple, not anyone else. Since the Marquis of Mountain Face agreed, he could not go against it. The world of martial artists had its own rules. This had nothing to do with cultivation or status. Of course, some people would abide by it, while others would not. The Marquis of Mountain Face would abide by it. This was his personality. "If you want to fight me, be prepared to die." Yin Luoxing's disciple spoke. His voice was the same as Yin Luoxing's, cold and sinister. Traces of killing intent seemed to penetrate the air and cover Chen Zong. A cold wind blew. Yin Luoxing's disciple strode over. The cold and sinister aura became more intense. As the cold wind blew, the temperature of the surrounding air rapidly dropped. "The one to die won't be me." Chen Zong responded neither quickly nor slowly. He pulled out the red lightning sword and ancient fault sword and slowly walked towards his opponent. With each step, his aura was also raised and his sharpness was astonishing. Everyone stared with wide eyes. Just from the aura alone, the cultivation of the Marquis of Mountain Face's disciple, Chen Zong, was at the peak of the 8th transformation realm. That's right, it was the peak of the 8th transformation realm, and not the late 8th transformation realm. Yin Luoxing's disciple's cultivation was at the early 9th transformation realm. Two super geniuses. Yang Tianzhao was helpless. This was supposed to be a battle between him and Chen Zong. Marquis Wushan was also stunned. He was supposed to be the disruptor, but now he had become a bystander. However, it was good to watch. He was very clear about his disciple's strength, but he did not know the strength of the Marquis of Mountain Face's disciple. In this battle, he would be able to see clearly who was stronger between him and his disciple, Flying Ape. Chen Zong and Yin Luoxing's disciple continued to close in on each other. When the distance was less than 10 meters, both of them entered the spirit, energy, and soul realm. Chen Zong could feel that his opponent's spirit, energy, and soul realm had also reached perfection. When the distance was reduced to 10 meters, Yin Luoxing's disciple suddenly erupted. Like a black wind, he rushed over at an extremely fast speed, bringing with him a shocking chill. It was like a black wind was roaring. Chen Zong only saw a black shadow flash in front of him, and his opponent had already crossed 10 meters. This speed was not inferior to his shocking dust step. With a wave of his wide black sleeves, it brought about a series of cyclones. Chen Zong even caught a glimpse of a black light shooting out from it. It was a palm print. The palm print was black, condensed with a high degree of inner strength. Its power was terrifying, and it could shatter steel with a single palm. It fiercely pressed down on Chen Zong's chest. The highly condensed palm pressure directly compressed the air under the palm. Before the palm print arrived, Chen Zong could feel the terrifying power contained within. If he was hit by this palm, even his mixed yuan body would not be able to withstand it. Fast, sudden, fierce. Chen Zong did not panic at all. He did not dodge, and his sword pierced through the air. Like a red lightning bolt tearing through the sky, with an astonishing sharpness and overbearingness, the sword pierced towards his opponent's face. It looked like a method of mutual destruction, but Yin Luosheng's disciple had no choice but to dodge. Although the palm strike could hit Chen Zong, it was not certain that it could kill him. If he was stabbed by the sword, the probability of him dying was even higher. Decisive palm, like a black cloud, quickly flew back. Chen Zong's sword followed closely, and with a dazzling light, it suddenly accelerated and pierced through his opponent. Unexpectedly, it was only a shadow. The moment the sword pierced through his opponent, Chen Zong knew that he had missed. Without hesitation, he turned around, the ancient sword with a powerful force like a mountain. Yin Luosheng's disciple appeared under the ancient sword, as if he had sent himself to Chen Zong's sword to await death. He raised his arm, and his inner strength poured into it. It was as if it was made of steel, resisting the ancient sword's attack. The sound of metal clashing was ear-piercing. Chen Zong could feel the vibration from the ancient sword. Die! Yin Luosheng's disciple blocked the ancient sword's attack with one hand, and his other hand took the opportunity to sneak out of his sleeve. Like a poisonous snake coming out of its hole, he attacked Chen Zong's heart from a tricky angle. Heart-shattering palm. Before the energy arrived, Chen Zong already felt his heart beating violently as if it had been hit. Chaotic heaven-breaking origin. Great flying dragon sword. After his cultivation reached the peak of rank 8, Chen Zong's inner strength was even more powerful and domineering. It poured into the red thunder sword, and with a dragon's roar, the sword light burst out and turned into a red flying dragon. With a domineering attitude, it attacked Yin Luosheng's disciple. Peak 3-star battle strength. Whether it was Chen Zong or Yin Luosheng's disciple, they all had peak 3-star battle strength. No one was surprised that Yin Luosheng's disciple had peak 3-star battle strength. It would be strange if they didn't. However, they all heard that at the gathering half a month ago, Chen Zong's battle strength was only at the peak of 3-star. In just half a month, he had reached the peak of 3-star. This kind of improvement was too shocking. If this kid is given more time, wouldn't he? At least 4-star battle strength is unavoidable. A peak 3-star combat strength could only dominate a county and become famous in a province, but in the entire dynasty, it wasn't much. Only those who had attained 4-star combat strength could truly be considered to have stepped onto the stage of the younger generation of geniuses in the entire dynasty. It could be said that the current Chen Zong already had the qualifications to step onto the stage of the dynasty's young geniuses. The only thing he lacked was time. According to the potential that Chen Zong had shown, this time wouldn't be too long. Chapter 281. Marquis Lin Shan, Marquis Wu Shan, and Yin Luosheng, the three pseudo-transcendent realm masters, stood in different directions, forming a triangle separated by 100 meters. 4 pseudo-transcendent realm masters, the difference between 100 meters, 10 meters, and 1 meter wasn't much, they could all be crossed in an instant, but at the same time, they could also react quickly and retreat calmly. In the middle of these 3 masters, Chernzong and Yin Luoxing's disciple were engaged in a fierce battle. The two sides had already passed the initial probing stage, and the battle was becoming more and more intense. Yin Luoxing's disciple used palm techniques, each of which contained a terrifying amount of power. Under his robe, his arms were like steel, capable of resisting Chernzong's twin swords. However, the power of the Red Thunder Sword and Ancient Imperial Sword was so great that Yin Luoxing's disciple didn't dare to meet them head-on. Only when he couldn't dodge did he have no choice but to use his arms to block. Sword lights flashed like lightning, sometimes surging like a tidal wave. Chernzong had already let loose and displayed all his sword skills. Each of his sword skills had reached the subtle realm, which consumed less Saint Chi and was more powerful. Like a violent storm, like a flash of light, all of a sudden it transformed into a gentle breeze. The instantaneous change in sword skills and power caused Yin Luoxing's disciple, who had never fought Chernzong before and wasn't familiar with Chernzong, was unable to adapt. His rhythm was disrupted and he was forced into a passive position. Under his black robe, Yin Luoxing's brow furrowed slightly before relaxing. Chernzong's sword skills were far more exquisite than he had expected, but his disciple wasn't so easy to deal with. Suddenly, two sword chi streaked through the air, cutting off Yin Luoxing's disciple's path of retreat. Void-splitting cross-slash. The dazzling cross-shaped sword light tore through the air, as if it was going to split the world into four. Unable to dodge, Yin Luoxing's disciple was directly struck. "Good!" someone shouted in a low voice. They naturally hoped that Chernzong could win and kill him. However, Chernzong was not happy at all. The moment his two swords hit his opponent, he felt as if he had lost his target. It was very sudden, as if his swords were not under any force, and he felt as if he had let go of his target. Moreover, the black robe seemed to have a unique force that made him feel as if his strength was about to leak out, and he could not stop himself from rushing forward. The black robe that had been divided into 4 parts suddenly fluttered, as if it was infinitely enlarged. Like a dark cloud covering the sky, it covered Chernzong. A strong sense of crisis made Chernzong's eyebrows twitch. Shocking dust steps. Making a prompt decision, Chernzong dashed forward in his black robe. Behind him, a chilly wind filled with murderous intent whistled. When it brushed past his back, Chernzong felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. His pure yang blood qi seemed to be frozen in an instant. It was fortunate that he had dodged the attack. Otherwise, he would have been severely injured. Unknowingly, Yin Luoxing's disciple had appeared behind Chernzong and launched a killing move. He had thought that he could take advantage of this opportunity to kill Chernzong, or at least severely injure him. He did not expect that he would still be able to dodge. Seeing that Chernzong still had not broken free from the black robe's shackles, Yin Luoxing's disciple attacked again. Like a black wind, his two palms linked together. One after another, black palm prints brought along a chilly wind and surged like a torrent. Without holding back, they all blasted towards Chernzong. The sharp sword light cut the black robe into pieces, as if the water of the Milky Way was pouring down, and the blue sea was flowing. The palm prints shattered and the sword light collapsed. Chernzong and Yin Luoxing's disciple closed in on each other and fought in close combat. Their swords changed and their palms linked together. Every move was extremely dangerous. The Qi-refining realm martial artists present were all horrified and broke out in cold sweat. That kind of danger was soul-stirring. What a strong strength! Yang Tianzhao whispered to himself. With this kind of strength, even he would not dare to say that he could win. At most, it would be a draw. Very strong. Marquis Wu Shan's disciple, Fei Yuan, had a solemn expression at first. Then, his arrogant eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Fighting with such a strong peer and defeating the other party gave him the greatest sense of accomplishment. Chilly wind ghost cry. Yin Luoxing's disciple, who had lost his black robe and was wearing a black armor with black armor on his arms, had an evil look on his face. With a low shout, his right hand's fist, palm and claw instantly changed. His inner strength rushed out at different speeds and circled around his arm, bringing with it a chilly black wind that whistled. The whining sound was like the cries of evil spirits in the dark night, disturbing one's mind and making one's mind absent-minded. Chen Zong only felt darkness before his eyes. Amidst the chilly wind, a ferocious face appeared out of thin air, emitting a strange and sharp cry. It was like a demon's voice piercing through one's mind. Suddenly, it opened its mouth. The pitch-black mouth was like an endless abyss that wanted to devour him. My will is like a sword slash. Chen Zong's mind was not shaken. His spiritual will was highly condensed, and he instantly eliminated the feeling of absent-mindedness. His eyes shone with a sharp light, and his two swords slashed through the air. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yin Luoxing's disciple had already performed a secret technique. A black aura surrounded his body, extremely cold and gloomy. His momentum rose in a straight line, almost stepping into the 4-star level. Chilly wind 100 steps strike. 10 meters away, Yin Luoxing's disciple pressed his palm into the air. A terrible force instantly passed through the air and blasted towards Chen Zong's heart. The coldness made Chen Zong's heart contract instantly. Under the chaotic heaven energy-breaking force, the ancient imperial sword slashed down. Chilly wind consecutive palm. After performing the secret technique, Yin Luoxing's disciple's strength increased a lot. He seemed to be able to suppress Chen Zong. Once the chilly wind palm was performed, it could not be stopped at all. Carefree and unrestrained. Under the opponent's chilly wind palm, Chen Zong only felt a chill all over his body. Traces of cold and gloomy chilliness kept drilling into his body through the pores all over his body, as if it wanted to freeze Chen Zong from the inside out. The wind from the palm whistled like continuous waves. Chen Zong was like a small boat, drifting with the waves in the stormy sea, in danger of being overturned and shattered at any time. Pressure came from all directions. Chen Zong felt that his 4 limbs seemed to have become stiff, and he was gradually at a disadvantage. Father, is junior brother okay? Guan Yunxi asked with a face full of concern. He's fine, Marquis Linshan said, but he seemed to be at ease with Chen Zong. Miss, young master hasn't used his full strength yet. Yan Wei stood on the side and smiled. Hearing the words of Marquis Linshan and Yan Wei, Guan Yunxi was relieved. Burning blood battle law. Chen Zong also used a secret technique. His pure yang blood qi collided violently, as if it was burning. It turned into a blood-red qi that filled his body and mixed with the chaotic heaven origin shattering force, greatly increasing its power. Chen Zong's body was surrounded by a blood-red aura. It looked like a layer of faint red flames, exuding a pure yang aura. It's the burning blood battle law. What astonishing blood qi. The strength of this blood qi. The true martial realm cultivators were surprised, while the 3 pseudo-transcendents were shocked. At the same time, a guess appeared in their minds at the same time. Pure yang blood qi. Perfect blood qi. Wu Ming, kill him at all costs. Yin Luoxing didn't know if his judgment was accurate, but as long as there was a chance, he couldn't miss it. Perfect blood qi. It was a realm that only a few proud sons of heaven could reach. It laid down an incomparably solid foundation and had even greater potential. Marquis Wu Shan was stunned, and a kind of jealousy grew in his heart. If it was really the perfect blood qi, then Guan Zishan had such good luck. On the other hand, Marquis Lin Shan was pleasantly surprised. If it was really the perfect blood qi, then this disciple was even more outstanding than he had imagined. Perfect blood qi, peerless earth-grade secret art, perfect strength training. Marquis Lin Shan couldn't help but feel excited as he thought about it. Now the key was to confirm whether Chen Zong had reached the perfect blood qi. Burning blood qi was different from the burning blood technique. The burning blood battle law was a very practical secret technique. The power it produced was closely related to the strength of the cultivator's own blood chi. The blood chi of an ordinary strength training cultivator belonged to the standard level, so the effect of the burning blood battle law was only average. Some cultivators who refined their blood chi would exceed the standard level. For Chenzong, whose blood chi was perfect and pure yang, the burning blood battle law's power was supplied to his body from his blood chi. Not only did it increase his internal strength, but it also seemed to strengthen his physique. His footsteps crisscrossed, and his figure turned into a red lightning bolt that streaked across the air. He instantly closed in on Yin Luosheng's disciple, Wu Ming, leaving a long scarlet flame trail behind him. So fast! How can he be so fast? The spectators were all shocked. Compared to before, Chenzong's speed was at least 30% faster. A 30% increase in speed didn't have much of an effect on the weak, but the stronger the person, the more obvious the effect. Fu Jiuzhong was startled and hastily retreated to avoid the attack. Two scarlet sword lights tore through the sky before him. They were even faster than his body, and the power they contained made Fu Jiuzhong's eyelids twitch. He felt as if his entire body was being torn apart. Wu Ming originally thought that he could suppress Chenzong by using his secret technique to greatly increase his strength. He might even have a chance to kill Chenzong. As for Chenzong also grasping a secret technique, this was within his expectations. Unexpectedly, Chenzong's strength increase after using his secret technique was too obvious. He was completely above Wu Ming. Wu Ming was very unwilling to accept that he had the upper hand in an instant. Moreover, his master, Yin Luosheng, had sent him a voice transmission saying that he had to kill Chenzong at all costs. He was asking him to risk his life. As this thought flashed through his mind, Chenzong's two swords crossed to form a scarlet sword net. It enveloped Wu Ming from the front at an astonishing speed. Every sword light in the sword net contained an extremely terrifying power, bringing a serious threat to Wu Ming. He felt the threat of death. The spectators, especially the martial artists in the chi refining realm, were all very excited. They secretly clenched their fists. From the scarlet sword net they felt an extreme sharpness that seemed to be able to cut through everything in the world. All the martial artists in the chi refining realm were thinking about how they would deal with this move if they were in Chenzong's place. Dodge? It was too late. The sword net was too fast, and it covered a large area. Face it head-on? It was very difficult. The sharp aura emitted by the sword net seemed to have an indestructible power. Yang Tianzhao and Duan Qinjian's faces were solemn. They felt that facing this scarlet sword net, only death would await them. Even if they used their secret techniques, they would not be able to avoid being injured. Fei Yuan's eyes were no longer arrogant. There was only seriousness. Under his arms that were longer than a normal person's, his hands were clenched into fists. Blue veins bulged on the back of his hands, indicating that he was extremely unsettled. This was because he felt that he had no confidence in resisting Chenzong's move. Chapter 282. Every strike of the scarlet sword net contained the strongest power of Chenzong's blood-stained battle technique. There were dozens of strikes, and they were formed under Chenzong's increased sword speed. This move did not have a name. It was a sudden inspiration from Chenzong, and it was as powerful as a killing move. It was fast and covered a large area. Fu Jiuzhong did not dodge or retreat. Instead, he stood still and crouched slightly. His expression was cold and solemn, and his eyes were filled with ruthlessness and coldness. He was like a ferocious wolf that wanted to tear everything in front of him to shreds. Fu Jiuzhong, who had assumed this posture, stretched out his arms and bent his fingers. The chilly wind around him whistled and quickly gathered toward his arms like ripples, then rushed to his palms. A scene that puzzled many people appeared. Fu Jiuzhong's palms were actually absorbing the chilly wind that was surging toward him like ripples. Marquis Lin Shan and Marquis Wu Shan's expressions suddenly changed. Yin Luoxing, who was under the black robe, seemed to let out a strange laugh. Fu Jiuzhong's reaction was very fast. By the time he finished doing all this, the scarlet sword net had arrived. "Open for me!" Fu Jiuzhong roared. As if he had used up all his strength, his 10 fingers bent like hooks, and the black gloves on his hands emitted traces of black light. His 10 fingers each grabbed the sword net, and he instantly exerted force and tore the sword net apart. The tyrannical energy fluctuations caused the remaining sword net to collapse and scatter. Countless scarlet rays of light swept past Fu Jiuzhong, but they did not cause him any harm. Pseudo-spiritual artifact, Situzhan said in a low voice. He actually has a pseudo-spiritual artifact, Duan Zhixing said in a low voice. Yin Luoxing, how dare you play such a trick? Marquis Lin Shan was furious. When did I play a trick? I've already told you before that my disciple's combat strength is not above the 3-star level, Yin Luoxing said with a smile. It sounded like he was defending himself, but it also sounded like he was proud of his success. Indeed, Fu Jiuzhong's combat strength was only close to the 4-star level even after using a secret technique. He had not truly reached the 4-star level, so he was not above the 3-star level. However, if he used a pseudo-spiritual artifact, it was different. His combat strength could be directly raised to the early 4-star level. Some powerful Qi-refining realm martial artists were able to unleash a portion of the pseudo-spiritual weapon's power, and the effect was very obvious. The difference between a 3-star pinnacle and a 4-star beginner was much greater than the difference between a 2-star pinnacle and a 3-star beginner. In other words, if there were no accidents, Chen Zong would be defeated and possibly killed. While everyone was still reacting to the situation, Fu Jiuzhong did not stop after tearing apart the net of swords. Instead, he charged toward Chen Zong at an incredible speed, sending out consecutive palm strikes. One after another, palm prints broke through the air. As they whistled, a chilly wind blew. The coldness seemed to seep into one's bones. Fortunately, Chen Zong had used the burning blood combat technique. Under the burning of his pure yang qi and blood, the temperature was astonishing. However, he was still slightly affected. This kind of coldness shocked Chen Zong. When the sword light pierced through the air and cut open the first palm print, Chen Zong could feel the power contained in it. It was very shocking and much stronger than before. Traces of gloomy and cold aura quickly spread from the sword to the palm. His inner force vibrated and his qi and blood erupted, destroying the cold and gloomy aura. Chen Zong also heard the crowd's exclamations. Naturally, he knew that his opponent had used a pseudo-spiritual weapon. His figure flashed, and like a red lightning bolt, he disappeared from Fu Jiuzhong's sight and reappeared in front of him in an instant. Fu Jiuzhong had activated the pseudo-spiritual weapon's power and increased the power of his attacks, but he did not increase his speed. Chen Zong was still faster than him. However, Fu Jiuzhong's reaction was very fast. The moment Chen Zong appeared in front of him, he had already finished gathering power with his palms. He sent out a palm strike, stirring up a terrifying roar of gloomy wind. Chen Zong was even faster. His pupils instantly turned silver as if they contained an extremely terrifying power. Spirit Sword. The burning blood combat technique was not the only secret technique that Chen Zong cultivated. Unlike the burning blood combat technique, the Spirit Sword was a secret technique that focused purely on one's willpower. It also attacked one's willpower. Fu Jiuzhong's attack was very fast, but Chen Zong's Spirit Sword was even faster. In an instant, 2 invisible sword-like rays of light shot out from Chen Zong's eyes. They crossed a short distance and shot into Fu Jiuzhong's eyes with indescribable speed. Fu Jiuzhong felt as if his head had been pierced by a sword. The intense pain caused his body to involuntarily tremble. His palms, which were about to strike out, also froze in midair. Fu Jiuzhong subconsciously closed his eyes in extreme pain. Fu Jiuzhong's eyes flew open in a very short moment. His eyes were bloodshot, and they contained an astonishing amount of ruthlessness and killing intent. It seemed as if they would drip blood at any moment. Fu Jiuzhong's palms, which had paused in midair, suddenly changed directions and blocked Chen Zong's two swords. His palms quickly moved and grabbed the blades of the two swords. Pseudo-spiritual weapons possessed great power. At the same time, they were extremely tough and durable. It could be said that the material of pseudo-spiritual weapons was superior to the majority of divine weapons. Although the Red Lightning Sword and Ancient Imperial Sword were very sharp, they could not cut through Fu Jiuzhong's pseudo-spiritual glove. A contest of strength. Fu Jiuzhong tightly gripped the blades of the two swords. He wanted to seize Chen Zong's swords. For a swordsman, the sword was the most important component of their strength. Once they lost their swords, their combat power would immediately plummet. Chen Zong could not possibly let Fu Jiuzhong seize the two swords. However, Chen Zong was very surprised. One had to know that his willpower was very strong, far surpassing that of other martial artists of the same level. When he used the Spirit Sword secret technique, the impact was very strong. Even if he could not kill his opponent, he could still obstruct them, just like in his battle with Silver Saber Fort's Jiang Baichen. However, it was not very effective against Fu Jiuzhong. There were only two reasons for this. The first was that Fu Jiuzhong's willpower was extremely strong, so strong that it was not inferior to Chen Zong's, or even stronger. The second was that Fu Jiuzhong already knew that Chen Zong had mastered the Spirit Sword secret technique and had prepared for it. The latter was more likely. Fu Jiuzhong's Spirit Sword did not work. When the two swords were caught, a frigid energy continuously invaded Chen Zong's arms through the swords, trying to freeze his arms. However, it was resisted by his burning pure yang blood and qi. At the same time, it also increased the consumption of his pure yang blood and qi. Fu Jiuzhong was a very difficult opponent to deal with, especially when he had a pseudo-spiritual weapon. Chen Zong knew that he had to bring out more trump cards. The triple revolving force secret technique was an option. It could greatly increase the strength of one's inner strength, but the price was that one's inner strength would be exhausted after a short period of time. However, Chen Zong did not intend to do so. This was because the triple revolving force secret technique required some time. Moreover, he had already used the burning blood combat technique. Many secret techniques would put a burden on the body. The more secret techniques used at the same time, the greater the burden. If the burden of using one secret technique was 1, then the burden of using 2 secret techniques at the same time was not 2, but 3 or even higher. However, there were some secret techniques that did not have a burden, such as the Tiger Power Body. Of course, a secret technique like the Tiger Power Body would have to endure extreme pain during the cultivation process. The chaotic heaven-breaking energy surged and instantly poured into the quaint bracelet on his right hand. This bracelet was called the Dragon Power Bracelet. It was obtained from a cave of Martial King Huntian and was considered a gift from Martial King Huntian. At first, Chen Zong only knew that the Dragon Power Bracelet had an inexplicable power. Not long ago, when he learned about the so-called pseudo-spiritual weapon, he was sure that the Dragon Power Bracelet was a pseudo-spiritual weapon. Fortunately, it was a pseudo-spiritual weapon. If it was a real spiritual weapon, Chen Zong would not be able to use half of its power. He might even get himself killed. All this time, Chen Zong had not used the power of the Dragon Power Bracelet. This time, he had no choice but to use it. A dragon's roar resounded in all directions, hitting everyone's eardrums. It was as if a dragon had awakened. A powerful force burst out from Chen Zong's right hand. A pseudo-spiritual weapon. Everyone, including Marquis Linshan, was shocked. Chen Zong actually had a pseudo-spiritual weapon. This disciple of mine is deeper than I thought. Marquis Linshan muttered to himself. Only he could hear it. Most people could not recognize a pseudo-spiritual weapon when its power was not activated. Not to mention that Chen Zong wore it on his right hand and usually covered it with his sleeve. It was even harder to notice. Marquis Linshan did not pay special attention to it. After all, in his opinion, it was impossible for Chen Zong to have a pseudo-spiritual weapon. Dragon-shaped energy burst out from Chen Zong's right hand. Under the guidance of Chen Zong's tyrannical spiritual will, it poured into the sword in his hand and immediately erupted with an astonishing power. It instantly bounced off one of Fu Jiuzhong's palms and stabbed towards Fu Jiuzhong with the power of the Dragon Power Bracelet. Fu Jiuzhong had no choice but to let go and retreat. After Chen Zong used the power of the Dragon Power Bracelet, the balance between the two sides was broken again. Seizing the opportunity to counterattack, Chen Zong used Infinite Sword Slash. The first slash was faster than the Aurora. Fu Jiuzhong could only passively resist. Before he could adjust, the second slash arrived. The third slash. The fourth slash. The fifth slash. The faces of the Silver Saber Fort's people immediately turned gloomy. This was Jiang Baichen's Infinite Sword Slash. One slash after another, Fu Jiuzhong had no chance to counterattack. He could only retreat again and again, using his pseudo-spiritual weapon and his own power to passively defend. Some parts of his body were cut open because he could not defend in time and were dripping with blood. Chen Zong's slash became more and more powerful as it went on. Fu Jiuzhong gradually felt that he could not hold on any longer, as if the next slash would kill him. Yin Luoxing saw this and knew that the situation was hopeless. Unless Fu Jiuzhong could interrupt Chen Zong's swordsmanship, only death would await him if he continued. Could Fu Jiuzhong interrupt Chen Zong's swordsmanship? If Chen Zong did not use the power of the Dragon Power Bracelet, he could. But now, he could not. Fu Jiuzhong was like a small boat that could be destroyed by the sword light at any time. Fu Jiuzhong, kill him at all costs. Yin Luoxing's voice rang in Fu Jiuzhong's ears again. Fu Jiuzhong was slightly startled. A piece of flesh was cut off by the sword. The sharp pain woke him up. Yin Luoxing's words were equivalent to exchanging his life for Fu Jiuzhong's. Determined, Fu Jiuzhong charged at Chen Zong, allowing Chen Zong's two swords to pierce through his body. Then, with his palms brimming with the power of a pseudo-spiritual artifact, he ruthlessly slammed them at Chen Zong. Mutual destruction. Yin Luoxing's lips curled into a cruel smile. Be careful! Guan Yunxi cried out. The Marquis of Linshan instantly moved. Yin Luoxing also moved to intercept him. Chapter 283. Yin Luoxing's figure was like a dark cloud that filled the sky. After grabbing Fu Jiuzhong's pseudo-spirit artifact gauntlet, Yin Luoxing transformed into a dozen or so figures, each of them vivid and lifelike as they charged in different directions. One of them was aimed at Chen Zong. Marquis Linshan's expression changed. He quickly changed direction and rushed toward Chen Zong to protect Chen Zong. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yin Luoxing quickly retreated. The change was too fast. From Fu Jiuzhong's desperate attempt to take Chen Zong's life, to Yin Luoxing's escape, it was only a blink of an eye. It was so fast that many people couldn't react. Marquis Linshan naturally reacted, but he didn't make a move because he knew that even if he made a move, he wouldn't be able to make the other party stay. Why waste his energy? Marquis Linshan appeared beside Chen Zong and gently patted Chen Zong's shoulder. A tyrannical energy instantly poured into Chen Zong's body, dispelling the cold energy that invaded Chen Zong's body. Fu Jiuzhong's desperate attempt wasn't in vain. At least Chen Zong was injured. However, after Marquis Linshan's help dispelled the cold energy, Chen Zong's injuries quickly healed. However, after using the burning blood combat technique, his pure yang blood essence was greatly burned, leaving him with less than 20% left. This made Chen Zong look pale, as if he had lost too much blood. He seemed weak and powerless, and his internal energy was almost depleted. In short, the battle with Fu Jiuzhong had caused Chen Zong's strength to drop to the freezing point. Even so, Chen Zong's figure stood straight, his back straight like a sword pointing to the sky. His aura was astonishing. No one dared to underestimate him because not long ago, he had displayed astonishing strength. After activating his pseudo-spiritual weapon, he even displayed a 4-star battle strength. Throughout the dynasty's history, many 4-star, 5-star, and 6-star geniuses were inseparable from pseudo-spiritual weapons. It could be said that pseudo-spiritual weapons could also be counted as part of one's battle strength. Chen Zong wasn't a 3-star battle strength now, but an early 4-star battle strength. "This guy is really good at hiding," Guan Yunqi said. It sounded like a reprimand, but his face was full of smiles. The Marquis of Linshan took out a pill and fed it to Chen Zong. Instantly, the inner strength and qi and blood he had expended began to recover rapidly. In just a few breaths of time, Chen Zong's pale complexion receded and became rosy again. It took a while for everyone to recover from their shock. "Fort Master Situ, how about we wait for Chen Zong to recover before starting the battle with your disciple?" Marquis Linshan looked at Situ Zhan and asked. Instantly, numerous gazes descended onto Situ Zhan's face. Situ Zhan's face unconsciously twitched. Gambling battle? How were they supposed to fight? If he had known earlier that Chen Zong had this kind of strength, he would never have proposed a wager with the Marquis of Linshan. Yang Tianzhao's expression also changed. He wanted to fight Chen Zong, but he wasn't confident. After all, he had witnessed the battle between Chen Zong and Fu Jiuzhong. Based on the strength Fu Jiuzhong had displayed, Yang Tianzhao was indeed stronger than him. Even without using a pseudo-spiritual weapon, Fu Jiuzhong was still stronger than him. For this battle, the Silver Saber Fort admits defeat. Situ Zhan's mind spun, and he spoke word by word. He looked like he was gnashing his teeth. He knew Yang Tianzhao's strength very well. Even if he went all out, he wasn't a match for Chen Zong. Since that was the case, he might as well admit defeat to avoid losing face and the Mingguang treasured armor. "Farewell," Marquis Wushan said to Marquis Linshan, and he turned to leave with his disciple. The moment the flying ape turned around, a sharp light shot out from its arrogant eyes, as if it wanted to pierce through Chen Zong. The meaning in its eyes was obvious. It was not convinced. It couldn't defeat Chen Zong now, but in the future, it must challenge Chen Zong and defeat him. With just a glance, it was clear that the flying ape was different from Yang Tianzhao. According to the content of the wager, if Chen Zong lost, he would have to hand over the Origin Chaotic Breaking Force to the Silver Saber Fort. On the other hand, the Silver Saber Fort would have to hand over the Mingguang treasured armor, a pseudo-spiritual weapon. If Situ Zhan admitted defeat, it meant that he had lost the wager, and the Mingguang treasured armor would be lost. Situ Zhan and the elders of the Silver Saber Fort had ugly expressions, as if their parents had died. After all, the Mingguang treasured armor was one of the only 2 pseudo-spiritual weapons in the Silver Saber Fort. If it was lost, the Silver Saber Fort would only have one pseudo-spiritual weapon left, which was the long saber used by Situ Zhan. For a moment, the people of the Silver Saber Fort wanted to leave this sad place. Duan Chunjian also didn't challenge Chen Zong because he wasn't confident. Marquis Linshan had a smile on his face, but his heart was bursting with joy. To put it bluntly, the disciple acceptance ceremony was a way for the disciple to strengthen his reputation. Unexpectedly, it was so eye-catching that even Marquis Linshan's face was shining. Not long after, the disciple acceptance ceremony also ended. The people of the Silver Saber Fort were the first to leave. When they left, they looked like they were in a hurry, as if they wished they could grow a few more legs and a few more pairs of wings. The people outside didn't know why the people of the Silver Saber Fort were in such a hurry. They even looked a little embarrassed because they couldn't see the situation inside. Marquis, farewell. After Duan Zhixing bowed, he left with the people of the proud Sword Manor. One by one, the leaders of the forces bade farewell to Marquis Linshan. They also said goodbye to Chernzong before leaving. After all, Chernzong had been accepted as a disciple by Marquis Linshan, and this disciple acceptance ceremony was of great significance. Moreover, Chernzong's talent and potential were too shocking, so it was necessary to build a good relationship with him. Some leaders were even thinking about introducing the young and beautiful women of their forces to Chernzong. It would be best if they could develop a relationship and become close to him. Chernzong didn't know that he had become a hot commodity in the eyes of many people. In other words, the pseudo-spiritual weapon, the Dragon Power Bracelet, is a treasure left behind by Martial King Huntian. Marquis Linshan's eyes lit up as he said with a smile. He's really blessed, Yen Wei said with a smile. The value of a pseudo-spiritual weapon is very high. You exposed it in front of everyone, so you have to be careful in the future. Marquis Linshan solemnly warned, however, in Linshan County, no one should dare to touch you. Linshan County was the territory of Marquis Linshan. Attacking his disciple in his own territory was the same as going against him. Thinking of Marquis Linshan's powerful strength and his personal guards and army, anyone who dared to provoke him would die. Even if the Silver Saber Fort and the proud Sword Manor joined forces, they wouldn't be able to stop Marquis Linshan's anger. Of course, Marquis Linshan was Marquis Linshan, providing Chernzong with a backer. However, in the end, Chernzong still needed to be strong. After the leaders of the various forces left, they spread the news of what happened in the disciple acceptance ceremony. Of course, they skipped the matter of the Silver Saber Fort's gambling match. Otherwise, it would be a slap to the Silver Saber Fort's face. The consequences of going against the Silver Saber Fort would be terrible. However, there was no wall in the world that didn't have a crack. Gradually, the details of what happened in the disciple acceptance ceremony were known. Especially regarding Chernzong's talent and potential, he was praised time and time again. The #1 genius of Linshan County. Chernzong was crowned as the #1 genius, and no one doubted it anymore. A peak 8th transformation realm cultivator with a peak 3-star battle strength. In the history of Linshan County, this had never happened before. If he wasn't the #1 genius, then what was he? He even used the power of a pseudo-spiritual weapon, and his battle strength reached the early 4-star stage. Time flew. After the disciple acceptance ceremony, Chernzong declined all invitations from the outside world and focused on cultivation. Now, he had already mastered the Little Lonely Mountain visualization technique and had stepped into the threshold of enlightenment. However, he was still a distance away from the true enlightenment. Turning into a mountain and sensing the heaven and earth, it was as if his entire person had become one with the mountaineering list. This feeling was so wonderful that he wanted to immerse himself in it and never wake up again. But that was impossible. Cultivating the Little Lonely Mountain visualization technique would constantly consume mental energy. The stronger one's mental energy, the longer the strange state would last, and the greater the harvest. When his mental energy was almost exhausted, Chernzong would wake up. His entire body felt comfortable and comfortable. The mental energy that he had consumed was also rapidly recovering, like the nourishment of spring water, becoming purer and more condensed. If I can achieve enlightenment, my battle strength can reach 4-star without the Dragon Force bracelet, Chernzong thought to himself. Between 4-star and 3-star, that was a true leap. Other than Wuzhen, if my cultivation reaches the 9th refinement stage or the 6th stage of the chaotic heaven origin breaking force, my battle prowess will reach the 4-star level. Chernzong thought to himself. No matter which of the 3 paths he took, his battle strength would immediately soar. His future would be filled with hope, strength, and confidence. Everyone had their own path. While Chernzong was busy cultivating, Marquis Linshan and the others were also busy governing Linshan County. For Marquis Linshan, reaching the pseudo-transcendent realm was already his limit. Unless he had a breakthrough, it would be difficult for him to improve much no matter how much he cultivated. But cultivation was like sailing against the current. If he didn't advance, he would fall back. Therefore, Marquis Linshan also had to maintain a certain amount of cultivation time, at least to maintain his current strength. Walking out of the cultivation room, Yen Wei greeted him. Marquis. Yen Wei's expression was solemn. According to the intelligence sent back by the scouts, the magic wind hall is gradually withdrawing from Marquis Linshan. Yin Luoxing is still keeping his word. Marquis Linshan sneered, however, we can't let our guard down. Investigate strictly. This might be the other party's strategy to advance by retreating. Yes, Yen Wei replied. The day after tomorrow, I will prepare to set off for the royal capital, Marquis Linshan said, his eyes flashing. I will seek the position of a kingdom knight for Chernzong. Kingdom knight? Yen Wei was shocked and immediately became happy. If young master can become a kingdom knight, you will have another layer of protection. The tallest tree in the forest would be blown away by the wind. This was nature. When a cultivator was too outstanding, they would be admired and envied by others. This was also nature. Perhaps Chernzong could avoid some dangers with Marquis Linshan's protection, but he couldn't avoid all dangers. Moreover, cultivators needed to grow and couldn't always rely on others. Their own strength was the most important. Becoming a kingdom knight was equivalent to having a certain status in the dynasty. Not only could they enjoy the dynasty's salary, but they could also receive the dynasty's protection to a certain extent. Under normal circumstances, it would be very difficult for Chernzong to become a kingdom knight, but if there was a recommendation, the difficulty would be reduced by a lot. Chapter 284. When the wind blew, a few leaves that were still stubbornly hanging on the tree trunk were blown off. They turned yellow and withered, spinning in the cold wind. Circle after circle, they fell to the ground and quietly lay under the tree. Fallen leaves returned to their roots. The autumn wind blew gently, adding a bit of desolation between heaven and earth. It was late autumn. The first floor of the mountaineering list was the highest place on the mountaineering list, 990 meters. A person was standing on a cliff that protruded outwards like an eagle's beak. This person was not Shi Huanyue. Half a month ago, Shi Huanyue left the mountain overlook courtyard. It was not a temporary departure, but a separation. It was said that she was returning to her family. As soon as Shi Huanyue left, the first place on the mountaineering list was vacant. In the past, many people would have coveted this position. No one wanted to be first. But with Chernzong here, no one had a chance. Therefore, as expected, Chernzong directly became first on the mountaineering list and moved into the first floor. No one objected to it and no one could object to it. Since moving into the first floor of the mountaineering list, Chernzong felt different, especially when practicing the Lonely Mountain visualization skill. He regarded himself as a mountain. When he was on the 89th floor, he was only at the lower half of the mountain. But on the first floor, he was at the highest peak of the mountain. That feeling was completely different. Chernzong even wondered if that was the real meaning of the mountain overlook Marquis' creation of the mountaineering list. The top of the lonely mountain, overlooking the world from above. Of course, the height of the mountaineering list was only 990 meters, which was a little low, but the lonely mountain was real. The person standing on the cliff was none other than Chernzong. He cleared away all distracting thoughts and concentrated on cultivating the Lonely Mountain visualization technique. From a distance, it was not a person, but a mountain, as if it was integrated into the mountaineering list. Feeling the sky above and the earth below. Infinitely high. Zong had been standing here for half a day. His spiritual willpower was constantly consumed. But as he practiced the Lonely Mountain visualization skill, although the total amount of his spiritual willpower did not increase much, it was purified and condensed again and again, so he could last longer. Gradually, Zong seemed to feel the movement under his feet. It was like the beating of a heart, slow, deep, and rhythmic. The fluctuation was weak at first, but it gradually became obvious. It sounded like it was ringing in his ears, and it also seemed to be beating with Zong's heart. Bang, 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 becoming one with the mountain, supporting the earth below. This was the feeling. When Zong wanted to continue sensing, his mental power was almost depleted, and he woke up from his cultivation. Zong felt a little regretful because he felt that if he had persevered for a little longer, he might have been able to comprehend the descending earth in the little lonely mountain visualization technique. However, he was not discouraged and continued to work hard. He sat down in a comfortable position, emptied his mind, and allowed his almost depleted mental power to recover on its own. After recovering, Zong jumped up and drew his sword in the air. 2 beams of sword light streaked across the air for more than 10 meters, as if they were going to divide the world in front of them into 2. Sword after sword, every sword contained many subsequent changes that could correspond to various situations. It was played down and unhurried, and there was a kind of ease to it, like the clouds were moving and the flowers were blooming and withering. This was a kind of realm. Every move was not a killing move, nor was it a sword technique, but it contained the profoundness of many sword technique. 2 hours later, Zong put his sword back into the sheath. The sword light that filled the sky slowly dissipated, and the remaining sword marks also dispersed. Everything returned to normal. It feels like it's getting closer and closer. Zong's gaze seemed to penetrate the void and looked into the distance. Whether it was the little lonely mountain visualization technique or the realm of sword techniques, Zong felt that he had reached the edge of a breakthrough. Once he broke through, he would immediately enter a new realm. Now, let's break through first. Zong thought to himself. The cultivation of the peak of 8 transformation stage was actually the limit of 8 transformation stage. Zong kept condensing his inner strength, trying to condense it to the limit, and then break through. Now that he had reached the limit, it was time to break through. Sitting down cross-legged, Zong circulated the chaotic heaven origin shattering force, and the tyrannical inner strength surged between his bones and muscles. Wherever it passed, Zong's muscles seemed to tremble, bursting forth with astonishing power. The tyrannical immemorial body continuously squeezed out pure and vigorous primordial inner strength. This primordial inner strength flowed along his bones and muscles, and along with the tyrannical chaotic origin shattering force, it was quickly refined. On top of the foundation that had already reached its limit, it once again charged upwards. Between his bones and muscles, Zong was filled with the tyrannical origin destroying force. He felt that his body was about to burst open. The leap from 8 transformation stage to 9 transformation stage was a big leap. It was several times bigger than the leap from the late stage to the peak of 8 transformation stage. Naturally, the amount of inner strength required was much more than that. The capacity of his bones and muscles for inner strength was expanded little by little under the tyrannical impact of the origin-destroying force. It also seemed to become more tenacious. The origin-destroying force was fully activated, and traces of tyrannical aura spread out from Zong's body. It seemed to emit a faint halo like a burning flame swaying in the wind. When the capacity of his muscles and bones was expanded to a certain extent, Zong felt the chaotic heaven origin shattering force in his body trembling incessantly and rising steadily like a rising tide. In the end, it broke through its limits and reached a brand new height. His body that seemed to be about to burst open returned to normal, and the faint invisible aura around him was also restrained, returning to calmness. The moment he opened his eyes, 2 sharp lights shot out like a sword out of its sheath, leaving 2 long and straight tracks in the air, like sword marks. He opened his mouth slightly, and a wisp of white turbid aura shot out like a giant arrow from a siege crossbow. It pierced through the sky and shot 7 or 8 meters away before dissipating. What a powerful inner strength! Chen Zong stood motionless, clenched his hands, and muttered to himself as he felt the power contained in the origin-destroying force. The amount of inner strength has doubled, and the purity has increased by 30%. My combat strength should have broken through the 3-star limit and reached the early 4-star level. Reaching the early 4-star level with the help of a pseudo-spiritual weapon and reaching the early 4-star level with one's own strength were 2 different concepts. Most pseudo-spiritual weapons only had one ability, such as attack, defense, speed, and so on. Among them, there were more detailed classifications. For example, the ability of the Dragon Power Bracelet belonged to the attack category, and the pseudo-spiritual weapon used by Fu Jiuzhong also belonged to the attack category. The increase in strength from a pseudo-spiritual weapon belonged to the external category, and it was only a single one. For example, it was just an attack, and there were no other aspects such as speed or defense. Although it could increase one's combat strength, it was not comprehensive. The breakthrough in cultivation was different. The inner strength would become more vigorous and pure, and it would not only increase one's attack, but also one's defense and speed. It was a more comprehensive enhancement, an internal enhancement. Both had their advantages, but overall, the internal enhancement of one's cultivation was more beneficial. The most direct way to determine whether one's combat strength had reached the early 4-star level was to attack. Previously, Chen Zong had personally experienced the early 4-star level's combat strength. He did not move, but his body suddenly bounced up, and he pulled out his sword in the air. The early 9th transformation stage chaotic origin breaking energy surged through his bones and muscles, poured into his arms, and spread to the 2 swords at an even faster speed. 2 sword lights of different colors and thicknesses pierced through the air, turning into sword chi and shooting out. They crossed each other, as if the void in front of them was divided into 4, leaving 2 deep sword marks. Gazing at the 2 sword marks and carefully judging, Chen Zong's lips curled into a smile, and in the end, he could not help but laugh out loud. The early 4-star level's combat strength. Without using the Dragon Power Bracelet, he deserved to be called the early 4-star level's combat strength. With this level of combat strength, he was qualified to challenge the Jiao Dragon list of the Cloud Dragon dynasty. The 4-star level's combat strength was Chen Zong's recent goal. Now that he had achieved it, Chen Zong was relieved. Next, he would strive for a higher goal. The peak of the 9th transformation stage, the 6th level of the chaotic origin breaking energy, the peak of the Qi refining stage, Wu Zhen. After reaching the peak of the 9th transformation stage, many Qi refining stage martial artists' basic combat strength had reached the limit. If they wanted to improve their combat strength, they could only start from a few aspects. First, change to a more advanced cultivation method or martial art. Second, cultivate some secret methods to condense inner strength, making it purer and more powerful. Third, cultivate a secret method to improve one's physique. Fourth, obtain a pseudo-spiritual weapon. No matter which one it was not easy. It prevented most 9th transformation stage martial artists from improving their combat strength. Chen Zong was different. His cultivation was at the early 9th transformation stage of the Qi refining stage, and his cultivation method was a peerless earth level. There was still room for improvement. His essence, energy, and spirit had reached the peak, and he had begun to comprehend the truth. Chen Zong had advantages that most martial artists did not. However, Chen Zong also had the conditions that other martial artists had. When my cultivation reaches the peak of the 9th transformation stage, I will leave Mountain County, Chen Zong thought to himself. Training was a must for every martial artist. During the training process, one would face pressure and various unexpected situations to grow. It was not only cultivation or strength, but also abilities in all aspects. The two swords drew two different sword flowers in the air. When they were sheathed, the sound of the blades rubbing against the scabbard was melodious. Turning around, he used his movement technique and quickly descended the mountain. "Master, you're back." In the mountain viewing residence, Chunzong smiled and bowed when he saw Marquis Lin Shan. Marquis Lin Shan nodded. His gaze fell on Chunzong. "During the time I was away, your cultivation was early 9th transformation stage." Chunzong controlled his inner strength to release a trace of aura, allowing Marquis Lin Shan to sense it. "Not bad, early 9th transformation stage cultivation. Then your combat strength." As he spoke, Marquis Lin Shan's eyes were filled with hope. When he saw Chunzong nod, he smiled like a blooming flower. "Early 4-star stage. You have a higher chance of obtaining the title of State Knight." State Knight. Hearing this, Chunzong was shocked. Marquis Lin Shan left for a period of time. Chunzong did not know where he went. Could it be related to the title of State Knight? Chapter 285. The autumn air was crisp and clear, with no clouds for thousands of miles. It was a good time to travel. "Junior brother, make a name for yourself in the capital." Guan Yunxi smiled and raised his cup to see Chunzong off. "I will." Chunzong smiled and drank the wine in one gulp. Men and women of Jianghu were reluctant to part, but all affection was expressed in a cup of wine. Yan Wei followed Chunzong out of the mountain overlook courtyard with his eyes. Marquis Lin Shan had left once and couldn't leave again. He had to stay and guard the mountain overlook commandery. The distance between the capital and mountain overlook commandery was long, and there might be some dangers along the way. Perhaps Chunzong could deal with some of the dangers with his own ability, but some could not be resisted without the strength of the genuine martial realm. In fact, Marquis Lin Shan could send a team of bodyguards to escort him, but it would be too ostentatious and easy to be discovered. Moreover, after entering the capital, someone needed to be in charge. Moreover, Chunzong was not familiar with the roads, so Yan Wei's personal escort was the best choice. Only Marquis Lin Shan, Yan Wei, Chunzong, and Guan Yunxi knew about this trip. No one else knew. They left the mountain overlook courtyard and headed east. Yan Wei was carrying a bag with some dry rations inside. Chunzong was also carrying a bag with some dry rations inside. Night fell and the sky was full of stars. Halfway up the mountain, a bonfire burned. The dry wood crackled under the fire, and sparks drifted away. The light of the fire shone on the faces of the two, as if they were divine. One of them was Chunzong, and the other was Yan Wei. Yan Wei's cultivation was at the peak of LV9 genuine martial realm, but his strength was far superior to ordinary LV9 genuine martial realm expert. He was the number 1 expert under Marquis Lin Shan and also the commander of his bodyguards. "Uncle Wei, tell me about the genuine martial realm," Chunzong said. They had been on the road and didn't speak. Now that they were resting and cultivating, they had time to chat. Chunzong was very curious about the genuine martial realm, but he didn't know much about it. "All right, then let's talk about the true martial realm." Yan Wei smiled and said, "The true martial realm and the training realm belong to two major realms. The difference is very obvious. The training realm focuses on cultivating inner strength. Inner strength comes from the bones and muscles and from the physique. The true martial realm focuses on cultivating true power. True power is more advanced than inner strength. It is a powerful force that is produced by combining essence, energy, and spirit. In order to reach the true martial realm, one must first refine a strand of true power, which is called the primordial true power. With the primordial true power as a guide, one's inner strength and spirit will transform into true power. "Uncle Wei, How difficult is it to refine true power compared to refining inner energy? At least 10 times, Yen Wei said seriously, which surprised Chen Zong. 10 times was indeed amazing. It is said that a long time ago, breaking through to the true martial realm was extremely difficult, because to refine the true primordial qi, one could only rely on grinding, relying on repeated attempts. Yen Wei said, however, an ancestor created the true condensation technique, which reduced the difficulty of breaking through to the true martial realm by half. True condensation technique. Chen Zong was slightly surprised. In the Eastern land, he had never heard of such a technique. Otherwise, there would be more true martial realm warriors in the Eastern land. Thinking about it, other than the 3 geniuses of the true martial alliance, all the true martial realm warriors in the Eastern land were not young. They were at least over 30 years old. In the Eastern land, to be able to break through to the true martial realm before the age of 40 was considered to be very talented. However, in the Cloud Dragon dynasty, there were many warriors who reached the true martial realm before the age of 30. For example, the hidden dragon list in the dynasty corresponded to the true martial realm warriors under the age of 30, while the rising dragon list corresponded to the famous true martial realm warriors in the dynasty. Thinking about it this way, Chen Zong suddenly felt that the 3 geniuses of the true martial alliance in the Eastern land were indeed worthy of their name. They were very talented. If they came to the Cloud Dragon dynasty, it would be easy for them to enter the hidden dragon list. Chen Zong would never belittle himself, nor would he look down on others because he thought he was better than others. However, he was still surprised by the talents of the 3 geniuses. Uncle Wei, is it better to refine true power as early as possible? Chen Zong asked. No. Yen Wei shook his head. I heard that the realm of a warrior is divided into the transcendent realm and the transcendent realm. The Qi and blood realm, energy refining realm, and true martial realm are all below the transcendent realm. They are all realms that lay the foundation. The Qi and energy refining realm are the foundation of a warrior. The true martial realm is an extension of the foundation. It is the realm where one can truly develop one's potential. Only by laying a good foundation, casting it to the limit, and then developing one's own potential is the best. Chen Zong said thoughtfully. The foundation, no matter which realm or aspect it was very important. To build a house, one must first lay a good foundation. The foundation was the foundation. Only with a good foundation and a stable foundation could the house be built higher. However, some warriors are in a hurry to seek a breakthrough before their foundation has reached the limit. They don't know that this approach is cutting off their own future. Yen Wei said seriously, it is said that every transcendent realm cultivator casts their foundation to the limit when they are in the foundation realm. They would rather stay in the foundation realm for a long time in order to break the limit of their own foundation. The limit of the foundation is very important to the development of one's own potential. This is also why some warriors find it difficult to make progress after entering the true martial realm, while others can make rapid progress after entering the true martial realm. Chen Zong nodded and remembered it. Uncle Wei, since the true martial realm is a realm that develops one's own potential, then is the transcendent realm a realm that surpasses one's own strength? Chen Zong suddenly thought. I remember the Marquis once said that the reason why the transcendent realm is called the transcendent realm is because the masters of this realm have mastered extraordinary power. Yen Wei's face was full of fanaticism and yearning. It is said that it is a kind of extraordinary power. It is very magical. Transcendent power. Chen Zong was speechless, but these 4 words left an indelible mark in his heart, like a brand. Chen Zong had never asked the Marquis of Linshan about this information. It wasn't that he didn't want to ask, but every time he visited the Marquis of Linshan, he would have other questions about his own cultivation. Therefore, he placed them at the top of his priority list. After he finished asking, he would rush back to comprehend them, so he neglected these questions. Let's not talk about the transcendent realm. It is too far away from us. Perhaps I will never be able to break through in my lifetime. Yen Wei smiled. Let me tell you more about the true martial realm. The true martial realm is divided into 9 layers. The way to distinguish them is through true meridians. True meridians are hidden in the human body and cannot be detected unless one is in the true martial realm. Yen Wei continued. Opening true meridians is the way to develop one's own potential. A true meridian represents one layer of cultivation. After opening 9 true meridians, one's cultivation has reached the 9th layer of the true martial realm. Uncle Wei, there is a saying of great perfection in the blood force realm and great perfection in the strength refining realm. Is there a saying of great perfection in the true martial realm? Chen Zong asked again. It is said that there are a total of 10 true meridians in the human body, but under normal circumstances, only 9 can be opened. As for the 10th, no one knows where it is hidden. Yen Wei smiled. As long as you find and open the 10th true meridian, you can reach the great perfection of the true martial realm. As far as I know, in the past 1,000 years, there has only been one person who has reached the great perfection in the blood force realm, strength refining realm, and true martial realm. Yen Wei's eyes flashed as he looked at Chernzong, as if he wanted to pierce through Chernzong. That person is the martial king of heaven. Chernzong was surprised. Chernzong did not know how difficult it was to reach the great perfection of the strength refining realm and the great perfection of the true martial realm, but Chernzong knew that it was very difficult to reach the great perfection of the blood force realm. If it were not for a coincidence, he might not have the chance to reach it. The benefits of reaching the great perfection of the true martial realm were also great. Uncle Wei, is the martial king of heaven a member of the royal family? Chernzong was quite interested in the martial king of heaven after obtaining the chaotic yuan-breaking energy and the dragon power bracelet. No. Yen Wei shook his head. Martial king of heaven has a mysterious origin, and no one knows where he came from. However, as soon as he appeared, he challenged all the transcendence of the entire dynasty. It is said that even the strongest man of the royal family was not his opponent. It is said that he was defeated in less than 10 moves. Chernzong's face was full of shock. When he heard the 3 disciples of the Silver Saber Castle talk about it before, he only felt that it was vague and did not have a clear idea. Now that Yen Wei mentioned it, it was more intuitive. There were many martial artists in the Cloud Dragon dynasty, including countless true martial realm and a considerable number of transcendent. The strongest transcendents were naturally extraordinary, but he could not even withstand 10 moves from the martial king of heaven. It was hard to imagine. Such a strong man, what kind of style was that? Chernzong could not help but yearn for it. Suddenly, Chernzong thought further. The Cloud Dragon dynasty alone was many times larger and more powerful than the Eastern continent. However, the martial king of heaven came from outside the Cloud Dragon dynasty. In other words, there were other powerful existences outside the Cloud Dragon dynasty. This was the real world of martial arts. His mood was agitated, his blood was boiling, and a powerful aura spread from Chernzong's body. This was a kind of fighting spirit that soared to the sky. Young master, I think, with your talent and potential, it is very likely that you will break through and become a transcendent, Yen Wei said. This was the unanimous opinion of him and Marquis Lin Shan. It's still early. Chernzong smiled. Although he also wanted to break through to the transcendence, there was still the true martial realm in between. What's more, he had not really reached the peak of the strength refining realm. There was still a lot of room for improvement. Chernzong did not know how much time it would take. It could be 1 year, 2 years, or even 3 years. Chernzong was not afraid of wasting time and energy. What he was afraid of was not having a direction to move forward. Uncle Wei, Is the star-level division of the true martial realm the same as the strength-refining realm? Chunzong asked again. The star level of the strength-refining realm is modified according to the true martial realm. Yen Wei smiled and said, the true martial realm cultivates heaven-grade cultivation methods and martial arts. The peak of the 9th layer of the true martial realm cultivates heaven-grade low-rank cultivation methods and martial arts to the extreme. Their combat strength is at the early stage of the 1-star realm, the most common peak of the 9th layer of the true martial realm. This division is much more detailed than the strength-refining realm. Chunzong smiled. With the true condensation technique, it means that the probability of a strength-refining realm cultivator breaking through to the true martial realm is greatly increased. However, the breakthrough from the true martial realm to the transcendence is extremely difficult. 1 in 10,000 is not enough to describe it. In order to distinguish the strength of the peak of the 9th layer of the true martial realm, the star-level division was created. The 9-star realm is the highest combat strength. When the 7-star combat strength reaches the level of the transcendent. Chapter 286. Marquis Lin Shan's round trip between Mountain Overlook City and the Royal City, as well as his stay in the Royal City, took a total of half a month. If a pseudo-transcendent realm master needed this much time, then those below the pseudo-transcendent realm would need even more time. The difference in cultivation between Chunzong and Yen Wei was too great. Yen Wei had to take care of Chunzong, so his speed was even slower. Under Yen Wei's lead, the two took shortcuts, crossing mountains and ridges. They traveled at full speed during the day and only stopped late at night to rest and practice their secret arts and martial arts. Along the way, they also encountered some dangers, such as some true martial realm demonic beasts or some powerful bandit. If it was Chunzong, he would have to think of a way to kill him, but with Yen Wei, no one could stop him. After a month, Chunzong finally stepped into the king's capital. In this 1 month's time, even though Chunzong's training time had been shorter than usual due to the constant travel, he had still managed to achieve a breakthrough in his cultivation. He had reached the middle stage of the 9th refinement stage, and his battle prowess had increased by another level. Furthermore, he had witnessed Yen Wei's attacks many times and had gained some insights from them, further enriching his swordsmanship. The king's capital was a bustling area surrounded by 20-meter-high and 5-meter-thick walls. The ancient walls were modeled, telling of the vicissitudes of time. On the walls, there were sentries to monitor all movements outside. The king's capital was an important place for the king's capital and could not be lost. Most of the powerhouses and geniuses of the king's capital are concentrated in the king's capital. Yen Wei said as he led Chunzong to the huge ancient city gate, "If you want to make a name for yourself, you have to start from the king's capital." Chunzong nodded. Unlike the monster beasts in the eastern continent, the cultivators of the Cloud Dragon dynasty had never been threatened by the monster beast army. Therefore, their initial cultivation was not to resist the monster beasts, but to strengthen themselves and pursue the martial Tao, making a name for themselves. Even for many cultivators, making a name for themselves was a way to prove themselves. The imperial city is not like Linshan County. The royal family is the most powerful. There are also nobles and high officials in the imperial court. They have a lot of power and are very complicated. If you accidentally get involved, you may be swallowed whole. Yen Wei's voice was full of emotion, as if he had experienced it deeply. Young master, with your talent and potential, once you display them, there will be many people who want to rope you in. Yen Wei thought about it and continued, "The Marquis also warned me that no matter who is trying to rope you in, I have to see clearly and think thrice before I act. If you are unwilling, it is best to obtain the title of State Knight and return to Linshan Commandery." Chunzong nodded. "After entering the capital, let's go to the Guan mansion first." "All right." The Marquis of Linshan's name was in the mountains, so he naturally wasn't a rootless duckweed. His roots were in the royal capital's Guan residence. Within the imperial capital, the Guan residence was also a well-known family. This was because the Guan residence not only had the Marquis of Mountain Front, but also another marquis. His title was the Marquis of Jingyuan. Having two marquises in one family was very rare. One had to know that in the entire Cloud Dragon dynasty, there were more than 10,000 officials, but there were only 20 or so who had the title of Marquis. Each county had a Marquis overseeing it, while the other marquises were either in the army or within the imperial capital. Currently, there were a total of 5 marquises in the imperial capital, and the Marquis of Jingyuan was one of them. In addition to the marquises, there were also 5 kings in the dynasty. 3 of the kings were overseeing the 3 provinces, while the other 2 lived in the imperial capital. The 5 kings were all true transcendents, and were also one of the few transcendents in the dynasty. As for the 20 or so marquises, they were all pseudo-transcendents. As Yen Wei walked through the huge city gates, the roads were smooth and wide. There was an endless stream of horses and carriages, and it was bustling with activity. Walking on the streets, Chernzong felt the unique prosperity. This was something that even the Eastern continent's true martial main city couldn't compare to, not even a tenth of it. As people came and went, Chernzong felt that many of them were emitting a tyrannical aura. It was the aura of inner force. Some of them were even tyrannical in their blood and qi. Some of them even emitted an extremely powerful aura that far surpassed inner force. The Eastern continent claimed that everyone was a martial artist, but in fact, it wasn't. At least half of the people were still unable to practice martial arts. One was limited by talent and the other was limited by resources. After all, the qi and blood realm in the martial artist system was the foundation of the foundation. It was closely related to the human body. Only by strengthening one's qi and blood qi could one become truly powerful. This required a lot of food to supplement, and in the later stages, ordinary food couldn't keep up with the body's consumption. Forcing one to cultivate would only bring unnecessary wear and tear to the body. After all, those who had the financial resources to buy herbs and so on were only a small part of the population. When one reached the qi refining realm, even if one didn't have suitable herbs or pills, they could slowly improve without harming the body. But in the Cloud Dragon dynasty, it was different. Everyone was truly a martial artist. Even if it was a peddler or a waiter in a restaurant, they were at least at the qi and blood realm 4th stage. With a strong qi and blood qi and a strong body, they would have a better spirit. Naturally, they would work harder, earn more money, and further promote their cultivation, forming a virtuous cycle. It could be said that the martial arts in the Cloud Dragon dynasty had already formed a virtuous cycle. Unless there was a major disaster, it would only become stronger and stronger with the passage of time. Young master, there's actually something special about the royal capital. It's divided into an inner and outer city. It's a city within a city. Yen Wei led Chernzong quickly along the wide road and said, "The outer city is where many forces gather, while the inner city is where the royal family and the marquis residences gather." The inner city was the real city of the royal capital. It was where the royal family resided and was the most important. Walking through the bustling streets, Chernzong also saw the inner city's walls. There were no shops within 1,000 meters of the inner city's walls, and no idle people were allowed to come close. The inner city's walls were 10 meters high. Compared to the outer city's walls, although it was half the size, it was more exquisite. It seemed to be made of metal, and it looked very hard and unbreakable. The inner city's gates were made of bronze and were tightly shut. There were 2 guards standing on each side of the gate. They wore silver armor and had long swords at their waist. Their expressions were cold and solemn, and their eyes were as sharp as blades. When Chernzong and Yen Wei approached, the 2 guards' gazes immediately fell on their faces, as if they wanted to see through them. Yan Wei's expression didn't change, but Chen Zong felt like he was being pointed at by a long sword, as if he was going to be pierced. 2 genuine martial realm warriors. Chen Zong was surprised. Using genuine martial realm warriors as guards to guard the city gates was indeed a big deal. Chen Zong could even feel even more obscure gazes coming from all directions, landing on his body. Each gaze brought about an invisible pressure, and he was sure that they were all true martial realm martial artists. They should be the so-called hidden sentries, as expected of the inner city of the royal capital. Such precautions. Chen Zong couldn't help but think to himself, "Stop. This is the inner city of the royal capital. Unrelated people are not allowed to approach." One of the guards said coldly. He was a member of the Imperial Guard and took orders from the Emperor directly. Therefore, regardless of whether it was a king or a marquis, he would not show any mercy to anyone who violated the rules. Yan Wei took out a token from his pocket. It was the token of the Marquis of Linshan. After carefully examining the token and asking a few questions, the 2 guards opened the inner city gates and let Yan Wei and Chen Zong in. There were no shops within 1,000 meters of the inner city behind the city gate. It was very spacious. The streets were as wide as the outer city, but the flooring was more exquisite. The shops on the left and right were not only larger, but also more extravagantly decorated. It was very impressive. The people entering and exiting the shops were also dressed in luxurious clothes. They were extraordinary. "The Guan residence is not far from here," Yan Wei said. After leading Chen Zong forward, they turned into a street on the right. Not long after, they came to a stop, and a huge mansion appeared before their eyes. Yan Wei greets the Marquis of Jinyuan. Yan Wei bowed and Chen Zong followed suit. This was the main hall of the Guan residence. At the head of the hall was a middle-aged man who looked similar to the Marquis of Linshan, but seemed more mature. He was one of the 2 marquises of the Guan residence, the Marquis of Jinyuan. He was the head of the Guan residence, and also the elder brother of the Marquis of Linshan, Guan Zishan. The 2 marquises were a family of brothers. They were the Marquis of Jinyuan and the Marquis of Linshan. "You may dispense with the formalities, Guard Yan," the Marquis of Jinyuan said solemnly. His imposing gaze fell on Chen Zong's face. Chen Zong suddenly felt like he was being seen through. However, the leakless body made Chen Zong's aura restrained. Even someone as powerful as the Marquis of Jinyuan couldn't see through him. As expected, the Marquis of Jinyuan frowned slightly. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. He couldn't see through him. "You are Chen Zong. Are you my second brother's new disciple?" the Marquis of Jinyuan asked with a serious expression. "Yes." Chen Zong responded respectfully. This was his honored master's big brother. Just this point alone made Chen Zong have to give him the corresponding respect, not to mention the other party's identity as a pseudo-transcendent realm master and a marquis of the dynasty. "Second brother asked you to come to the imperial city for the state knight title," the Marquis of Jinyuan said unhurriedly. "However, other than you, there are others who also want the state knight title. However, there is a limit to the number of state knights conferred by the dynasty every year. Whether you can obtain it depends on your ability." Chen Zong listened quietly. In this regard, there was insufficient information, so there was no room for him to interrupt. Yan Wei also listened quietly. The Marquis of Jinyuan had always lived in the inner city, so he had a clearer grasp of the dynasty's movements. In the past, there was only one state knight title every year. Only one person could obtain the state knight title. Hearing the Marquis of Jinyuan's words, Chen Zong wasn't surprised because Yan Wei had already told him this on the way here. One state knight title per year was the limit, and it was possible that no one could obtain it. It could be said that the dynasty would rather have nothing than something substandard, which made the state knight title even more precious. However, due to some special reasons this year, The preliminary decision was to increase the number of state knight titles to 3. As for the final decision, we will know after some time. As soon as the Marquis of Jingyuan's words came out, not only Yen Wei, but Chen Zong also revealed a face full of surprise and joy. If it was only one spot, the competition would be very, very high. Chen Zong actually wasn't sure whether he could obtain it. After all, there were many geniuses in the dynasty, and he wasn't the only one. However, if the number of spots increased from 1 to 3, it meant that the chances had increased by a lot. Perhaps in the end, Chen Zong could obtain a spot and be conferred the title of State Knight. Chapter 287. Young Master, the Marquis still needs me, so I'll be leaving first. I look forward to your good news. Outside the Guan residence, Yen Wei smiled. Uncle Wei, have a safe trip. Chen Zong also smiled. By the way, tell Master that I'll do my best to fight for it. Okay. Yen Wei waved his hand, turned and strode away without any reluctance. For martial artists like them, meeting and parting was normal. Parting in life and death was nothing. After Yen Wei left, Chen Zong temporarily stayed in the Guan residence in the inner city of the capital. This was his master's home, so it was normal for him to stay. According to the Marquis of Jingyuan, the title of State Knight was only preliminary and not final. He needed to wait. The residence that the Marquis of Jingyuan arranged for Chen Zong was called Red Maple Court. Compared to the outer city, the inner city was not large, but its area was very wide. In the entire inner city, apart from the royal palace, there were also the residences of the Marquis, Marshal, and other important members of the imperial court. Each residence occupied a large area, and there were many different courtyards in each residence. Red Maple Court was filled with red maple trees. It was now late autumn, and the maple leaves were as dense as stars, covering the branches in a large patch of bright red, dazzling and dazzling. The saying that red maple surpasses fire referred to the leaves of the red maple trees. The front door of Red Maple Court was made of white jade. The round white jade complemented the red maple leaves in the garden, creating an indescribable contrast that stirred the soul. Stepping through the white jade door, Chen Zong smelled a distinct and unique scent. It was the scent of red maple, and its fragrance was unique. The winding path was paved with white jade fragments. On the left and right sides there were maple leaves drooping down. Along the path, there were a few houses built with black and red ancient wood. Red Maple Court was fully equipped. There were bedrooms and other daily necessities, as well as practice rooms. There were even people who delivered meals. The Red Maple Court was octagonal, dozens of meters wide. There were artificial mountains and flowing water all around, and maple leaves hanging down. The scenery was unique. The two sword lights of different colors were like butterflies flying through flowers. As they fluttered in the air, they had mysterious and unpredictable trajectories. The sword was fleeting and suddenly pierced forward. It was sharp and decisive, as if it could pierce through everything in the world. Just when the power was about to be exhausted, it suddenly changed and slanted downward. It was indescribably tricky and strange. The other sword appeared from a blind spot, as if it had leaped out from the sea of nothingness. It caught him off guard, but it contained a terrifying power. The combination of the two swords was perfect, as if two swordplay experts with a high degree of tacit understanding had perfectly performed their moves. Chen Zong practiced diligently. In the past month, he had seen Yen Wei fight many times. Yen Wei also intended to instruct him. Therefore, in terms of swordsmanship, Chen Zong had made significant progress, especially in the art of dual swords, which had become more exquisite. On the Red Maple Court, countless sword lights were circling around. Some were straight and piercing, some were straight and crisscrossing, some were curved like crescent moons, and some were meandering like silk thread. They were as flexible as eels in the water. Every sword seemed to contain amazing sharpness, which could cut fine steel without causing any damage to the surroundings. It showed Chunzong's amazing control of power. An hour later, Chunzong put away his swords. Countless sword lights were still shuttling back and forth in the air. After a few breaths, they gradually faded and disappeared. Clap, clap, clap. Someone was clapping their hands. Chunzong saw 3 figures walking along the winding path made of broken jade. 2 men and 1 woman, dressed in fine clothes, with a long sword at their waist and an emerald jade pendant on the other side. They were extraordinary. "What can I do for you?" Chunzong asked unhurriedly. He had been focused on practicing his swordsmanship. The cultivation of these 3 people was not low. When they came in, they were very quiet, so he did not notice them from a distance. "I heard that you are my uncle's disciple?" One of the young men looked Chunzong up and down, as if he was looking at goods. Chunzong was not happy, but he did not say anything. Instead, he looked at him. According to what he said, this person should be the son of Marquis Jingyuan. The son of Marquis Jingyuan had a high status. Moreover, this person's aura fluctuation was at the peak of the 9th transformation of the Qi refining state. Chunzong did not know how strong his combat ability was, but he should not be weak. "I heard that your purpose is to get the title of State Knight?" Seeing that Chunzong did not respond, the son of the Jingyuan Marquis was a little displeased, and his face darkened. The man beside him immediately spoke with a hint of reprimand, while the woman had a playful expression, as if she was here to watch the show. "Yes." Chunzong nodded. "I said you have no chance. The title of State Knight is not something a bumpkin from a small place like you can covet. I advise you to go back to where you came from." The man sneered. The son of Marquis Jingyuan did not speak again, but the meaning in his eyes was the same. "You are afraid." Chunzong ignored the young man. His eyes fell directly on the son of Marquis Jingyuan's face and said slowly, as if his thoughts were guessed, the son of Marquis Jingyuan's face darkened involuntarily. "Afraid." The young man next to the son of Marquis Jingyuan suddenly screamed. His eyes shone with a terrifying light. "Who do you think you are? A bumpkin from a small place. Who would be afraid of you? Chunzong, right? Since you don't want to leave, don't regret it when the time comes. The title of State Knight is not something a lucky person like you can get." The son of Marquis Jingyuan spoke again. His voice was cold and inexplicable threatening. It was quite imposing. In fact, the son of Marquis Jingyuan was not afraid. He also wanted to become a State Knight, but it was not a sure thing. Naturally, he wanted to reduce as many opponents as possible. The fewer opponents there were, the greater the chance of being conferred the title of State Knight. It would be best if he could drive Chunzong away, but there was nothing he could do if he couldn't. After all, he was the disciple of Marquis Linshan. This little incident did not disturb Chunzong's cultivation plan. Chunzong seized every minute to cultivate hard and improve his cultivation and combat strength as much as possible. As night fell, Chunzong stood in the red maple meadow with his eyes closed, cultivating the Lonely Mountain visualization technique. After a month of traveling, he had no time to cultivate this enlightenment technique at all. His progress had slowed down. Chunzong also found that the effect of cultivating the Lonely Mountain visualization technique here was not as good as cultivating on the mountaineering list. Maybe I should find a mountain outside the city. Chunzong thought to himself. Who is it? As soon as he finished cultivating the Lonely Mountain visualization technique, Chunzong felt a faint fluctuation. He quickly turned around. His eyes were like unsheathed swords, and the sword light flashed across the night sky. There was no reply, but a strong wind whistled. A dazzling sword light tore the night sky apart. It was sharp and decisive. In an instant it crossed a dozen meters and slashed at Chunzong's face. As soon as the attack was made, Chunzong judged that the attack had the combat strength of a peak 3-star level. The sword art was exquisite, and the attacker was a master swordsman. The red thunder sword was unsheathed. It flashed across the sky like a red lightning bolt and hit the opponent's sword. The moment the sword was knocked away, the sword followed the trajectory and stabbed at the opponent's face. No matter who the attacker was, Chen Zong would not show mercy. The black shadow made a turn in the air and dodged Chen Zong's sword like a boomerang. He attacked from the other side, but what greeted him was a second sword light that slashed down as if it was going to split the heavens and earth. The sword made the black shadow feel suffocated, as if he had turned into a mountain and was about to be cut in half. He raised his sword to defend himself, but the overwhelming power was like a mountain. He was knocked away, and his long sword was trembling. The black shadow tapped on the rockery, gathered his strength, and waved his sword in the air. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 3 sharp sword lights broke through the air and flew toward Chen Zong. The black shadow took the opportunity to retreat at an extremely fast speed. After the 2 swords struck down and shattered the 3 sword lights, the black shadow disappeared. Chen Zong chased after him for a while and found that the black shadow had disappeared completely. Chen Zong did not chase after him. He returned to the red maple garden. He was sure that the black shadow must be a warrior from the Guan mansion. Otherwise, he would not be so familiar with the Guan mansion. Chen Zong also felt that the opponent had no intention to kill him. Maybe he came to teach him a lesson. Basically, Chen Zong knew who the Black Shadow was. He did not intend to tell Marquis Jingyuan. It was just a small trick. With a swoosh, a black shadow flew in through the window and landed on the ground silently. "You're back. How did the test go?" Guan Yunxiao, the son of Marquis Jingyuan, poured himself a glass of wine and asked, "Young Master Xiao, Chen Zong's combat ability is barely at the 4-star level." The man in black took off his mask and revealed his face. It was the young man who had scolded and mocked Chen Zong many times during the day. "Barely 4-star battle strength. To be able to become my uncle's disciple, having such battle strength is not surprising." Guan Yunxiao was surprised at first, but soon after, he drank the wine in his cup and smiled. 4-star level might be rare in places like Linshan Commandery and could be called the number 1, but it was nothing in a place like the capital. Guan Yunxiao's combat ability was already at the 4-star level. "Young Master Xiao, do you think we should?" A trace of viciousness flashed in the eyes of the young man in black. "No need. No matter what, he's still my uncle's disciple. If we go too far, we won't be giving my uncle any face. My father won't be happy then." Guan Yunxiao sneered. "Originally, I wanted to give him a chance to back off, so as not to embarrass himself and ruin my uncle's reputation. Since he didn't want to and relied on his 4-star combat ability, we'll make him suffer. He also knows that the capital isn't a place where people from small places can play." "Young Master Xiao, you have a plan." The young man in black's eyes lit up and he smiled. "I have an idea, but we still need his cooperation." Guan Yunxiao smiled coldly. "It's just that whether Chen Zong will cooperate or not, that's not clear." "Young Master Xiao, I have an idea. We'll make Chen Zong cooperate even if he doesn't want to." The black-clothed young man rolled his eyes and chuckled. Didn't the Marquis instruct young Master Xiao to find a time to take Chen Zong to the Dragon Pavilion for the assessment? "We can take this opportunity to give him a hard blow." Guan Yunxiao thought for a moment and then nodded. This method was feasible. Chen Zong didn't rest for the whole night and had been cultivating. Sword technique, cultivation method, lonely mountain visualization technique, all of these must be cultivated. He can't leave any of them behind. In the blink of an eye, the sky was getting brighter. Chen Zong had also finished a whole night of cultivation and was sitting cross-legged on the red maple plain. Chapter 288. The royal capital was a gathering place for high officials and nobles. There were many places for entertainment, and two of them were the most famous. One was called the 100 Fragrances Association. Although the name was ordinary, it was extraordinary. The 100 Fragrances Association had a great background and was known to have countless beauties. It was the #1 place in the royal capital. Many rich people and young people would come here to spend money. At the same time, it was an excellent place to make friends. It was a veritable money-squandering establishment. The other was called the Dragon Pavilion. The Dragon Pavilion was different from the 100 Fragrances Association. Its founder came from the royal capital. It was created by a retired emperor in order to attract talent. It had a history of more than 1,000 years and had been passed down from generation to generation. The Dragon Pavilion was ancient and contained a rich aura of history. It stood alone in the outer city and was surrounded by bustling places. The atmosphere was very rich. The Dragon Pavilion had a total of 5 floors. Each floor was 9 meters tall. 9 was the extreme number and had a special symbolic meaning, especially for the royal capital. There was another reason why the retired emperor, who had founded the Dragon Pavilion, had built a 5-story pavilion with each floor being 9 meters tall. One must know that the emperor had always had another title, and that was the sovereign of the 9 and 5. The 9 and 5 was not a title that anyone could use. If an emperor did not use this title, it would be an offense and would be punished. But the retired emperor was different. In addition, the royal capital valued talent. Therefore, the Dragon Pavilion was built in the style of the 9 and 5. It symbolized that the geniuses here were all heroes and kings among men. They might even be emperors among martial artists. It was extraordinary. Walking to the outside of the Dragon Pavilion, Zhang Xian raised his head to take a look. The antique tall building seemed to have countless dragon carvings surrounding it from all directions, truly like a group of dragons surrounding it. At the very top, there was a round pearl the size of a human head. It was completely transparent like a flawless gem. Under the sunlight, there seemed to be multicolored light circulating within it. That was the so-called dragon pearl. Chernzong was shocked the moment he saw the Dragon Pavilion. How is it? It's not in Linshan County, right? Very shocking, isn't it? Guan Yunxiao laughed as a trace of contempt flashed in his eyes. It wasn't easy for him to bring Chernzong out. No matter what, he had to let him know that his 4-star combat strength was nothing in the capital. In fact, he couldn't ask Chernzong to come out because Chernzong had to seize the time to practice and improve his cultivation and combat strength as much as possible. Especially the practice of the Lonely Mountain visualization skill. He had to realize the truth as soon as possible. After rejecting Guan Yunxiao directly used the name of Marquis Zheng Yuan, stating that it was Marquis Zheng Yuan's idea to let Chernzong go to the Dragon Pavilion. As his master's elder brother, Chernzong had to show his respect. Chernzong accepted his suggestion after some consideration. Although cultivation was important, it was also important to meet other geniuses. Sometimes, the comprehension gained from exchanging blows with others would surpass dozens of days of cultivation. Therefore, Chernzong came. Even if Guan Yunxiao wanted to deal with him, Chernzong wasn't afraid, because no matter how he attacked, Chernzong could handle it. It was nothing more than experiencing some setback. Walking on this path, Chernzong had long been prepared. Go in, Guan Yunxiao said as he strode toward the Dragon Pavilion's door. The door was open as if welcoming anyone, but in fact, those who weren't qualified couldn't enter at all. Seeing Guan Yunxiao step through the door, Chernzong took a deep breath and also strode forward. With a flash, a person appeared in front of Chernzong, blocking his path. That person stared coldly at Chernzong. Guan Yunxiao stood not far away and watched with a smile on his face, as if he was watching a show. Do you have a recommendation from a pavilion member? The person who stopped Chernzong was a middle-aged man. His muscles were swollen like steel, and he looked very tough. He was as strong as an iron tower. Not just anyone could enter the Dragon Pavilion. One had to have enough qualifications. The so-called qualifications were recommendations. The people of the Dragon Pavilion were called pavilion members. If a newcomer wanted to enter the Dragon Pavilion, they needed a pavilion member's recommendation, which was equivalent to an invitation ticket and a stepping stone. Without a pavilion member's recommendation, no matter who you were, you couldn't enter the Dragon Pavilion. Looking at Guan Yunxiao's attitude now, it was obvious that he didn't have any intention of recommending him. He just wanted to watch the show and see him make a fool of himself. That's right, Guan Yunxiao had such thoughts. One had to know that the Dragon Pavilion represented the highest level of geniuses in the capital. It was the gathering place of geniuses, and also the gathering place of the highest level of geniuses in the entire dynasty. Who knew how many people longed to enter because it had an extraordinary meaning and a unique symbol. Becoming famous and stepping into the Dragon Pavilion was also a way. No matter who it was, as long as they had some understanding of the Dragon Pavilion, they would want to enter and become a pavilion member. Without a pavilion member's recommendation, you can't enter the Dragon Pavilion, the burly man said again, his eyes sharp as if he wanted to pierce Chen Zong. As a guard of the Dragon Pavilion, he had seen many people who wanted to sneak into the Dragon Pavilion. Naturally, he also thought that Chen Zong was such a person. Chen Zong didn't respond. Instead, under Guan Yunxiao's mocking gaze, he turned around without hesitation and walked out of the Dragon Pavilion. Natural, decisive, without the slightest bit of sloppiness. It was just that simple and direct. The guard of the Dragon Pavilion was stunned. He had guarded the Dragon Pavilion for several years, but this was the first time he had seen someone who, after being stopped, turned around and left without a word of explanation. Moreover, he didn't look the slightest bit embarrassed. He was so calm, so confident, so much so that he didn't even look back. Guan Yunxiao was stunned. He had originally planned to make a fool of Chen Zong, but he didn't expect that Chen Zong didn't care at all. If he let Chen Zong leave, not only would he not be able to explain to Marquis Jingyuan, he would also be unable to carry out the next step of his plan. Wait! Guan Yunxiao quickly reacted and hurriedly said, I brought him here. I, Guan Yunxiao, recommend him with the qualifications of a human-level pavilion member. As he spoke, Guan Yunxiao quickly took out a token from his bosom. The guard took the black iron token and looked at it. On the front was the word human level, and on the bottom were the words Yunxiao. On the edge were two dragons connected head to tail, forming a circle. On the back, there was a relief sculpture of a dragon's head, and its eyes were inlaid with red gems that seemed to sparkle. This was the exclusive token of the Dragon Pavilion. Only those recognized by the Dragon Pavilion were qualified to receive it. It was the symbol of every pavilion member's identity. Guan Yunxiao was deflated, so Chen Zong naturally didn't leave. Instead, he walked into the Dragon Pavilion again. After all, his purpose in coming here was for the other geniuses. Guan Yunxiao walked in front with a cold face. He originally wanted to make a fool of Chen Zong, but he didn't expect to have the feeling of shooting himself in the foot. But thinking of something, Guan Yunxiao's lips curled into a sneer. It would be best if he could enter the Dragon Pavilion. At that time, if he couldn't even pass the test of the Dragon Pavilion, that would be the biggest joke in the world. At that time, what face would he have to continue staying in the Guan residence? He would have to pack up and leave the imperial city like a stray dog and return to the mountain overlook region. Guan Yunxiao had already sunk into his own beautiful fantasy. The first floor was divided into two parts. The front part was very spacious, with only one guard. Following Guan Yunxiao, Chen Zong walked to the back. The Dragon Pavilion had 5 floors, and the first floor was the largest. It was estimated that it could accommodate tens of thousands of teams at the same time. In the imperial city, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, It was very shocking to have such a large building. Pushing open the tightly shut door, he was greeted by an antique yet simple room. "Pavilion Elder, I recommend someone." Guan Yunxiao walked over, took out his token of the Dragon Pavilion, and handed it to an old man who was resting with his eyes closed. The old man was originally lying loosely on a dark red sandalwood bench, swaying leisurely, as if he had fallen asleep. Hearing Guan Yunxiao's words, he suddenly opened his eyes. The room that had seemed somewhat dark suddenly became bright. Chen Zong felt two sharp gazes, as if piercing through him, land on his face. Immediately, there seemed to be some bewilderment, because he could not see Chen Zong's cultivation. The old man was the Pavilion Elder of the Dragon Pavilion, one of the people sent by the Imperial City to guard here, and also the person in charge of the test. The old man took Guan Yunxiao's token and looked at it, confirming that it really was the token of the Dragon Pavilion. "Are you sure you want to be recommended? If you fail the test, your recommendation this year will be revoked." The old man looked at Guan Yunxiao and said sternly. "I'm sure," Guan Yunxiao said in an incomparably certain tone. It was just a recommendation in exchange for an opportunity to strike Chen Zong. Why not? The old man did not say anything else. He took out a piece of paper and copied the token, confirming his recommendation. "Report your name, origin, and cultivation." The old man handed the token back to Guan Yunxiao and asked Chen Zong. Chen Zong, disciple of the Marquis of Linshan of the Linshan County, mid-ninth transformation stage of the Qi refining stage, Chen Zong quickly and concisely replied. There were more than 20 marquises in the dynasty, and the old man remembered every one of them, especially the Marquis of Linshan, who was one of the 2 marquises of the Guan residence. Chen Zong was his disciple, so the old man could not help but take a second look. When he heard that Chen Zong's cultivation was at the mid-ninth transformation stage of the Qi refining stage, he was a bit surprised, but he did not say anything. He had seen many geniuses, but not all of them were qualified to pass the test of the Dragon Pavilion. It must be known that the Dragon Pavilion represented the top geniuses, who had the potential of at least a 4-star battle strength. "I'll go arrange the test now. Prepare yourself and wait for the notice," the Pavilion Elder said and turned to leave. "Prepare well. Don't ruin my uncle's reputation if you can't pass the test." Guan Yunxiao sneered. "Maybe I'll disappoint you." Chen Zong smiled nonchalantly. He realized that even though Guan Yunxiao was targeting him, he didn't overstep his boundaries. It wasn't like he had any killing intent. It was more like he was trying to intimidate Chen Zong, but he didn't want to do it himself. Chen Zong was very clear about his enemies. Killing intent was a standard line. If someone wanted to kill him, Chen Zong wouldn't be lenient. Even if he wasn't a match for them now, he would kill them one day. If someone didn't want to kill him, Chen Zong wouldn't kill him. However, if the other party wanted to teach him a lesson, then he could teach them a lesson in return. Chapter 289. The ceiling was inlaid with pearls the size of bowls, emitting light that was bright but not dazzling, illuminating the entire room. This was a secret room. The square secret room had the same length, width, and height, all 3 meters, just like a large square box. Inside the secret room, Chen Zong sat cross-legged in front of a wall, concentrating all his attention, his eyes staring at the wall in front of him. This wall was very strange, as if it was constructed from countless small parts, large and small, intricate and complicated. An ordinary person would feel dizzy just by looking at it, let alone carefully distinguish its mysteries. This wall was named the Wall of Thousand Turns by the Dragon Pavilion. As the name implied, it was full of twists and turns and was extremely mysterious. This was the first test to enter the Dragon Pavilion. Its difficulty had stumped countless geniuses who wanted to enter the Dragon Pavilion. Guan Yunxiao was the one who recommended it. Because he had to wait outside, He had a leisurely look on his face. "Elder, do you think he can pass the wall of 1,000 turns?" Guan Yunshao asked since he had nothing to do. "I don't know," the elder responded indifferently. "I guess he can't pass." Guan Yunshao was still full of smiles because he had taken the test himself and deeply knew the difficulty of the wall of 1,000 turns. The memory was still fresh in his mind. At the beginning, it was okay, but the further it went, the greater the burden on the spiritual level. It was simply a feeling that death was better than living. Although he passed the wall of 1,000 turns in the end, Guan Yunshao did not want to go through that experience again. That was torture, a kind of torture to his own spirit. Guan Yunshao was certain that no one who had tried the wall of 1,000 turns would want to go through it a second time. Moreover, there had been many people who had overestimated themselves and participated in the test. In the end, they had all fainted in front of the wall of 1,000 turns because their spiritual power had been overdrawn and they had to rest for several days to recover. Perhaps Chen Zong would be the next. From the beginning, Guan Yunshao had never looked at Chen Zong seriously. Because he was born and raised in the royal city, he had the arrogance of a citizen of the royal city and subconsciously looked down on people outside of the royal city. This was his nature and the mentality of many citizens of the royal city. Unless an outsider could show amazing ability, they could be looked down upon at any time. Even if some outsiders displayed extraordinary abilities, it was difficult to change the minds of the people in the capital. In fact, the vast majority of the so-called geniuses from outside the royal capital were unable to pass the Dragon Pavilion's test. It could be said that more than 90% of the current members of the Dragon Pavilion were from the royal capital. There are always exceptions to everything. Be careful not to be slapped in the face. The pavilion elder looked at Guan Yunshao with a faint smile and said unhurriedly. With just a few words, the pavilion elder could tell that Guan Yunshao was recommending the other party with ill intentions. But just as the pavilion elder said, there were always exceptions. What if the other party passed the test? At that time, not only would he be slapped in the face, it would also be equivalent to giving the other party a chance to enter the Dragon Pavilion. That was called trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. It won't happen. Guan Yunshao made a solemn vow. The cabinet elder didn't say anything else, because he knew very well that the people of the capital had an inexplicable pride that came from their bones. Unless they encountered a personal setback, it was difficult to change that kind of arrogance. Next to the pavilion elder, there was a half-meter-tall transparent water hourglass with dragons on both sides. The water inside was dripping down drop by drop through the sharp beak, evenly and rhythmically. This coiling dragon hourglass was used to calculate time. When the water inside ran out, it would take 1 hour. There was a clear scale, especially the scales between 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and 45 minutes. The wall of 1,000 turns test needed to be completed within a set time. Normally, it was 1 hour. When Guan Yunshao took the test, he completed it within an hour and then passed the second test to become a member of the Dragon Pavilion. But for people not from the royal capital, the test conditions were harsher. That was, one had to pass the wall of 1,000 turns test within 45 minutes. It was because of the missing 15 minutes that Guan Yunshao was confident that Chen Zong wouldn't be able to pass. He didn't think that Chen Zong's talent and potential could surpass his own. In fact, the pavilion elder also didn't think that Chen Zong could pass the test. The difference of 15 minutes was very obvious. This was also one of the reasons why the vast majority of geniuses outside the royal capital couldn't pass the Dragon Pavilion's test. In front of the wall of 1,000 turns, Chen Zong had already forgotten everything about the outside world. He was completely immersed in the wall of 1,000 turns. The wall was constructed from countless parts. This was a wall of mechanisms. Chen Zong was distinguishing the positions and functions of the various mechanisms, looking for their movement trajectories, and then cracking them. The difficulty of cracking this wall of 1,000 turns was that one had to first distinguish the various mechanism parts and find the pattern within. Only then could one crack it and open a door to walk out. At the very least, there were thousands of mechanical parts that were constantly rotating. Kacha, 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 kacha. After listening to it for a long time, there was a kind of demonic feeling that would drive one crazy. Under the continuous interference of such sounds, it was even more difficult to concentrate. The double interference of vision and hearing brought a very obvious burden to the five senses and the mind. Chern Zong was completely certain that if an ordinary martial artist at the peak of the 9th transformation stage entered here, it wouldn't take long for them to feel dizzy, nauseous, suffocated, vomiting, and even faint. Not to mention ordinary martial artists at the peak of the 9th transformation stage, even martial artists with 2-star battle strength were the same. Perhaps only those who had reached the 3-star level would be able to withstand it. However, whether or not they could crack this wall of 1,000 turns was an unknown. The difficulty was too great. It could be said that the first test was aimed at the mind and willpower. A martial artist must have a strong enough mind and willpower so that they wouldn't be easily disturbed by the outside world. Otherwise, if they weren't firm enough and tenacious enough, how could they walk further on the path of martial artists? In the secular world, there were all kinds of temptations and sensual pleasures. Only those who could be firm to the end would have the last laugh. In addition to temptation, a strong mind and willpower were also of obvious help to cultivation. Especially at the stage of the true martial realm, its effect was even more obvious and indispensable. Every member of the Pavilion of Dragons must enter the true martial realm. This was a 100% certainty, unless they encountered a special accident. The mind and willpower test was especially important. Chern Zong's advantage was very obvious. After obtaining the mysterious sword tip, his mind and willpower had been clearly developed and strengthened. Later, as he practiced and comprehended with the sword, his mind and willpower had also been constantly strengthened. Moreover, he had cultivated the Lonely Mountain visualization technique. Time and time again, Chern Zong's mind and willpower had far surpassed martial artists of the same level, surpassing many people. Of course, mind and willpower were invisible and colorless, invisible and untouchable. It was very difficult to make a clear judgment of how strong it was. To clearly see thousands of mechanism parts and remember their positions and operating trajectories, not only did this require a strong mind and willpower, but it also required an amazing memory. After that, it required enough insight to find the patterns within. If one was powerful enough, one could deduce the subsequent changes and so on. Now, Chern Zong not only remembered the thousands of mechanism parts clearly, but also found some of the patterns within and began to deduce them. The most common performance of those who took the wall of thousands of twists and turns was to memorize the thousands of mechanism parts and their operating trajectories. After following the trajectories for a cycle, they slowly looked for a way to crack it. A higher level was to follow the trajectories of the mechanism while looking for a way to crack it, which was faster. Even better was to follow the trajectories while deducing the following trajectories to find a way to crack it. As for those who knew the way to crack it at a glance, they were either sleep-talking or extremely familiar with the mechanism wall and knew it like the back of their hand. Chern Zong was not at all familiar with the wall of thousands of twists and turns. This was the first time he had heard of it and also the first time he had seen it. Moreover, he was not a sleep-talking person. Therefore, Chern Zong belonged to the third level and deduced according to the trajectories. In the blink of an eye, a quarter of an hour had passed. A quarter of an hour could be very short, but it could also be very long. Guan Yunxiao waited leisurely outside. He was patient, and waiting for at least 2 to 3/4 of an hour was nothing. He was looking forward to seeing Chen Zong's dejected expression when he was unable to crack the wall of thousands of twists and turns. Yes, he might even faint. The water in the coiling dragon hourglass continued to drip down. It had already reached the second scale and was slowly approaching the third scale. At this moment, a subtle but ear-piercing cracking sound rang out, instantly alarming the cabinet elder. The cabinet elder had been resting with his eyes closed, but his eyes suddenly opened. They shone brightly, causing Guan Yunxiao to feel as if there was a knife at his back. Guan Yunxiao faintly felt that the cracking sound was a little familiar. He didn't know why, but his heart suddenly beat wildly, as if it was going to jump out of his throat. He had a very bad premonition. Right in front of them, the originally tightly shut wall suddenly opened. Along with the subtle cracking sound, it slowly parted to the left and right. At the same time, Guan Yunxiao's arrogance and the cabinet elder's calmness were also parted. Guan Yunxiao's eyes widened, and his pupils contracted. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His fingers trembled as he pointed at the opened wall, as if he had seen a ghost. The cabinet elder's pupils contracted as well, and his eyes shone with a sharp light. Immediately, he subconsciously glanced at the hourglass. The second scale had not yet finished dripping. Under the watchful eyes of the two, a figure walked out with firm and steady steps. His expression was calm and his eyes were deep. There was no sign of fatigue. This was completely different from what Guan Yunxiao had imagined. There was a huge difference. Like a sword, it ruthlessly stabbed into his heart, mercilessly shattering his pride. No, this is only the first test. There is still the second test. Guan Yunxiao clenched his fists and secretly told himself. His eyes also became cold. Good. Thousands of words were finally condensed into one word. The cabinet elder smiled, looking very happy. One had to know that the first test for the people of the royal capital lasted for an hour, and was split into 45 minutes. Passing the test in 45 minutes was the most ordinary standard, and also the standard of most cabinet members. It represented the potential of 4 stars. In other words, cabinet members who could pass the test with this standard would at least have a combat strength of 4 stars. Of course, there might be some accidents and reach 5 stars, but such cases were very rare. Chapter 290. To add to yesterday's first update, the pavilion's member tokens were divided into 3 levels, which were closely related to the status and treatment the members enjoyed in the pavilion. The human level was the lowest, and most of the members were human level. Next was the earth level, and the highest was the heaven level. These 3 levels were divided according to the level of martial art. A human-grade pavilion member would usually be able to solve the 1,000 twists and turns wall of mechanisms in 45 minutes, an earth-grade pavilion member would be able to do it in 45 minutes, and a heaven-grade pavilion member would be able to do it in 30 minutes. As for those who could solve it in 15 minutes, ever since the establishment of the Pavilion of Dragons, there had only been one person who could do it, but that person had a profound understanding of mechanisms. Since Chernzong was able to decipher the 1,000-winding mechanism wall in half an hour, it was certain that he came from the faraway Linshan Commandery, so it was impossible for him to have seen a similar mechanism wall. This meant that he had the potential to become a heaven-grade cabinet member. Or perhaps, Chernzong had studied mechanisms before, but the possibility was very low. The inheritance of mechanisms only existed in the Imperial City, and there was only one of its kind. Thinking of this, the elder became even more excited. Heaven-level potential. What did that mean? It meant that one's future battle strength was very likely to reach the 6-star level. There were many geniuses in the Imperial City, but those who could reach the 6-star level in the Qi refinement realm were very, very few. Every one of them was at the top. However, there was still the second test. Only by passing or even excelling in the second test would one be qualified to become a member of the pavilion. Without resting, the elder immediately led Chen Zong to the next test. In fact, although the test was said to be 2 tests, it could also be said to be 3. The first test of cracking the 1,000 turns mechanism wall would undoubtedly put a huge burden on one's mind and will. Many people's minds and wills would be exhausted after cracking it, and they would be in a very bad state and would need to rest. However, the pavilion's test did not allow rest. One had to immediately enter the second test. This was equivalent to adding an invisible burden, like an invisible checkpoint. In just a short 10 seconds, the elder led Chen Zong to the second test. Enter from here and come out from the other side in 40 minutes. You'll pass the test. The elder's words were concise and comprehensive. He pointed at the open dark door in front of them, and then at another dark door not far away. The darkness seemed to be able to swallow everything, making one panic. Guan Yunxiao, who had followed them all the way here, sneered again. The difficulty of the first test was not low, and the difficulty of the second test would not be lower than the first test. Furthermore, the second test was aimed at different aspects, especially after exhausting one's mind and willpower in the first test, which would increase the difficulty of the second test. No one told Chen Zong what the content of the second round was. Just like the first round, he had no idea at all. It would bring him a certain amount of pressure. Taking a deep breath, Chen Zong glanced at the water hourglass that started to count down. Then, he strode forward unhurriedly and rushed into the dark door like a gust of wind. In the first test, Chen Zong had indeed used up a lot of his willpower to decipher the 1,000 twists and turns wall. He was only left with 40% of his willpower. Fortunately, Chen Zong's willpower had become stronger and purer, and his recovery speed was much faster than ordinary martial artists. His mind was highly focused, and his hands were relaxed and clenched. There was only darkness in front of him, the kind where he could not even see his own fingers. Suddenly, a melodious sword hum rang out, accompanied by 2 sharp sword lights. They were like crescent moons as they streaked across the sky. Soon after, the sound of collision rang out. Sparks flew out like the stars in the night sky. The eyesight of a martial artist in the Qi refining realm was much better than that of ordinary people. It was difficult to completely block their vision at night. Although it was not as clear as day, it was as clear as dusk. Chen Zong's eyesight was better than most of the martial artists in the Qi refining realm. In his eyes, there was not much difference between night and day. However, the darkness here was set up using a special method, which seriously interfered with a martial artist's eyesight. After a while, Chen Zong adjusted to the darkness, but he could only see some vague outlines. He brandished his 2 swords and displayed his sword skills, resisting the attacks coming from the darkness and rapidly advancing. Not only would the darkness interfere with one's vision, it would also cause one to lose their sense of direction. It would be extremely difficult to find an exit in the darkness. This was also the reason why only a small number of people could pass the test despite there being so many people taking the test. Moreover, most of them took 45 minutes to pass. The cabinet elder and Guan Yunxiao stood outside, waiting. "He definitely won't pass," Guan Yunxiao said in a low voice. "If he passes, you can still get the dragon tooth of the dragon pavilion," the cabinet elder said. Guan Yunxiao was very depressed. The dragon pavilion had a rule that if one wanted to enter the pavilion, they had to be recommended. If the recommendation failed, then they had to bear the corresponding consequences or punishment. However, if one passed the test and became a member of the Dragon Pavilion, then they could receive the corresponding reward. The Dragon Tooth of the Dragon Pavilion was something that every pavilion member needed. It was even more valuable than spirit shells. Bringing Chen Zong to the Dragon Pavilion was actually the idea of Guan Yunxiao's father, the Marquis of Xingyuan. After all, Chernzong was the disciple of the Marquis of Linshan. The Marquis of Linshan had a good relationship with the Marquis of Linshan, so he would naturally value Chernzong and give him a certain amount of training. As for whether Chernzong could pass the Dragon Pavilion's test, it was not something that the Marquis of Zhengyuan's concern. Guan Yunxiao did not dare to go against his father's wishes, so he planned to use this opportunity to give Chernzong a profound blow. But now it seemed that he had the intention of giving him a blow. Guan Yunxiao's current state of mind was that of unwillingness. In the darkness, Chernzong kept moving forward, constantly looking for an exit. Like the first test, the second test only lasted 40 minutes. Who told him not to be from the capital? The attacks from the darkness were completely irregular. Sometimes nothing happened for more than 10 seconds, and sometimes there were more than 10 attacks in 1 second. This made it even more difficult to deal with. At this time, he could not be the least bit anxious. He had to deal with it calmly and concentrate on exploring. The strength of the attacks coming from all directions was different. Sometimes they were very strong, at least at the peak of the 3-star level, and sometimes they were only 1 star. The changes in the strength of the attacks were also something that was difficult to deal with. With 2 swords in hand, the weight of his strength was at his will, and he could control it as he pleased. This showed Chernzong's astonishing control of strength. His 5 senses were raised to the extreme. When an unexpected attack appeared, Chernzong immediately reacted. The strength of the attack could actually be distinguished in advance. That was the sound of the wind being cut. This was something that could only be understood and not described. If someone were to see this, they would discover that in the darkness, Chernzong's 2 swords appeared to be very skillful, changing according to his will. His footsteps and figure also appeared to be very calm, as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. Gradually, Chernzong could distinguish that the attacks coming from all directions were hidden weapons, steel balls, short arrows, and the like. It should be here, Chernzong thought to himself. He slightly changed his direction and walked. The entrance, then the exit, and then the exit within a limited time. That would be considered passing the test. If the time limit was exceeded, it would be considered a failure. Failure in any of the 2 tests would result in no chance of entering the Dragon Pavilion. Moreover, each person only had 1 chance. The Pavilion Elder and Guan Yunxiao waited outside. One figure after another came from all directions. They were extremely fast. There were a total of 3 people, all of whom were elders. In fact, there was more than 1 Pavilion Elder in the Dragon Pavilion. There were several of them. Each of them was an expert of the true martial realm, at least in the late stage of the true martial realm. They were all very powerful. However, usually only 1 Pavilion Elder would appear. The other Pavilion Elders rarely showed up. Only when something special happened would they attract their attention. After these Pavilion Elders found out about the astonishing potential that Chernzong had shown in passing the first test, they immediately appeared. They wanted to see if Chernzong could pass the second test with his astonishing potential. If he can pass the second test in half an hour, then his potential will reach the heaven rank. A Pavilion Elder with a white beard stroked his white beard as he nodded and sighed. Unfortunately, even if he passes the second test in half an hour, he can only get an Earth rank token. Another Pavilion Elder smiled and said, "He was from the capital." That kind of pride was deep in his bones, almost to the point of being sick. However, the rules of the Dragon Pavilion were as such. Geniuses from outside the capital would be raised a level in the Dragon Pavilion's test. If it was a genius from the capital who passed the test in half an hour, they would be able to get a heaven rank token. However, this was the rule when the Dragon Pavilion was first established. Everyone could only abide by it. As for now, it all depended on whether Chernzong could pass the second test in half an hour. Looking at the water hourglass, a quarter of an hour had already passed. Water dripped down drop by drop. The second quarter of an hour was getting closer and closer. Everyone stared at the exit of the second test. It was pitch black and nothing could be seen. Even with the eyesight of a true martial realm expert, it was difficult to see clearly from outside. Just as the second quarter of an hour was about to pass, a blurry silhouette appeared in front of their eyes. "He's coming out!" "Half an hour!" The pavilion elders all cried out in alarm. Guan Yunxiao's face was full of astonishment. In their eyes, Chen Zong walked out of the darkness step by step. His hands danced, sword flowers bloomed, and the sword returned to its sheath. His fierce aura also calmed down. Although there were a few more people surprised, Chen Zong's expression did not change. He appeared very calm. The first test was passed in half an hour. The second test was also passed in half an hour, the pavilion elder said with a smile. Looking at Chen Zong, his gaze was full of praise. According to the rules of the Dragon Pavilion, Chen Zong, you have passed the test and become an Earth Pavilion member of the Dragon Pavilion. Congratulations, the pavilion elder added. Young man, your potential is not bad. The white-bearded pavilion elder chuckled. Many thanks. Chen Zong cupped his fists and bowed. Then he looked at Guan Yunxiao. Guan Yunxiao's face was gloomy. At this time, Guan Yunxiao had an indescribable feeling in his heart. In short, it was terrible, extremely terrible. There was not the slightest bit of joy. Chapter 291. Added to the second chapter updated yesterday. The token was bronze in color, with two lifelike dragons connected head to tail on the left and right. The word Earth was engraved on the front, and the word Chen Zong below. On the back, there was a carving of a dragon head, and its eyes were inlaid with flawless rubies, shining brightly. The token of the Dragon Pavilion was also known as the Dragon Token, which was of the Earth level. In addition to the Earth level all dragons command, Chen Zong also obtained another object. It was a jade-white object that resembled a crescent moon. It was round and smooth, and was engraved with dense patterns of flood dragons, as if a group of dragons were coiling around it. Its shape resembled a tooth, and it was about half the size of a thumb. This was a dragon tooth, a kind of currency circulated within the Dragon Pavilion. Chen Zong received a total of 10 dragon teeth, which was a rule of the Dragon Pavilion. New members of the pavilion would receive a corresponding dragon tooth. Human-level members would receive 1, Earth-level members would receive 10, and Heaven-level members would receive 100. Guan Yunxiao also received a reward, which was also 10 dragon teeth, because he recommended Chen Zong. However, Guan Yunxiao's expression was ugly at this time. The 10 dragon teeth in his hand were very hot, as if they had been roasted by flames. 10 dragon teeth were a large sum for him. It was usually difficult to get them. If he could get them, he would be grinning from ear to ear. But now, he got them through Chen Zong. That kind of feeling was indescribably sour. Chen Zong even thanked him, which was like a bright and sharp sword, fiercely stabbing into his wound and twisting it hard. Dragon teeth have many uses. You can exchange them for cultivation methods, martial arts, treasures, and so on of the Dragon Pavilion. You can also ask other members to do things for you. The Dragon Pavilion has a total of 5 floors. The first floor is for the assessment, the second floor is for human-level members, the third floor is for Earth-level members, the fourth floor is for Heaven-level members, and the fifth floor contains cultivation methods, martial arts, and treasures. If you have enough dragon teeth, you can also exchange them for peerless cultivation methods, martial arts, and even pseudo-spiritual weapons. The elder's words made Chen Zong's heart tremble. He really wanted to go to the 5th floor of the Dragon Pavilion to have a look. It even had peerless rank cultivation methods and martial arts. It was extraordinary. As if sensing Chen Zong's interest, the cabinet elder waved his hand to dismiss Chen Zong. At this moment, Guan Yunxiao's mind was in a mess. He felt as if his pride had been shattered, making him extremely uncomfortable. He unconsciously clenched his fists and tightened his grip on the dragon's tooth, causing it to creak. Chen Zong snorted coldly. In Guan Yunxiao's eyes, Chen Zong's calm expression seemed to be complacent. Unable to bear it any longer, he turned and strode away. The Grand Elder couldn't help but shake his head. Guan Yunxiao was the one who recommended Chen Zong. This was a very good relationship. He should take Chen Zong to the second or even the third floor. In the future, when Chen Zong made a meteoric rise, Guan Yunxiao would also be a beneficiary. Guan Yunxiao was a human-level cabinet member, while Chen Zong was an Earth-level cabinet member. In terms of talent and potential, Chen Zong surpassed Guan Yunxiao. The cabinet elder thought that Guan Yunxiao's correct approach was to put down his pride and build a good relationship with Chen Zong. Unfortunately, Guan Yunxiao was blinded by his pride and couldn't accept the established fact. Walking up to the second floor, Chen Zong heard a lot of noise. Standing at the top of the stairs, he looked around. There was a very spacious hall on the second floor, decorated in an ancient style. Whether it was the tables or chairs, there were dragon carvings. On the walls, there were also patterns of dragons circling around. It felt as if he had entered a place where dragons circled around. While Chen Zong was looking around the second floor, everyone in the hall also looked at Chen Zong. This was an unfamiliar face. Looking at his clothes, he was very ordinary and didn't look like a disciple with an extraordinary background. Basically, everyone knew the members of the Dragon Pavilion. What they looked like, what their names were, and even what their characteristics were. Every cabinet member knew. "Who are you?" Immediately, a tall young man got up and strode over. Frowning, he asked in a cold voice, "Do you know that this is the Dragon Pavilion? Not just anyone can come in." Before Chen Zong could answer, the man spoke again. "I don't know how you got past the guards and entered here, but you'd better get out now. Otherwise, if you're discovered, the consequences will be very serious." The man spoke again, full of a sense of superiority. Chen Zong shook his head imperceptibly and withdrew his gaze. He didn't even bother to respond and strode toward the stairs of the third floor. "Stop!" The tall young man felt that he was being looked down upon. His expression changed, and his right hand reached out to grab Chen Zong's shoulder like a tiger's claw. The wind under his hand whistled. Unexpectedly, the figure under the claw flashed, causing the claw to grab empty air. Just as he was about to attack again, a bright and dazzling light flashed in front of his eyes. The tall young man reacted quickly and hurriedly retreated. Taking a closer look, he saw a sharp sword pointing at him. He was immediately annoyed. "You've been exposed by me. Are you angry from embarrassment? I advise you to obediently put away your sword, lest you make a mistake." The tall young man sneered, as if he had grasped something. The others got up and walked over, their expressions unfriendly. Although it was fun to watch the show, this was the Dragon Pavilion. It wasn't a place where they could casually make a move. Immediately, they stopped in their tracks and stared blankly at the token in Chen Zong's hand. It was bronze in color, and the word Earth was clearly written. Below the word Earth were the two words Chen Zong. The tall young man's eyes widened. His face was full of astonishment, as if he had seen a ghost. Sheathing his sword and putting away the token, Chen Zong turned and walked up the stairs to the third floor, leaving behind a group of people who seemed to be in a state of chaos. "I'm not seeing things, am I? Earth-level dragon token. Chen Zong, I've never heard of this name. Is he a new member who just passed the assessment?" One by one, they began to discuss in shock. The members of the Dragon Pavilion were all in the Qi refining realm. Once they broke through to the true martial realm, they would leave the Dragon Pavilion. After all, the true martial realm and the Qi refining realm were two major realms. The gap was huge. Even a 6-star chi refining realm martial artist couldn't defeat the weakest true martial realm martial artist. The Dragon Pavilion had the most human level members. There were more than 100 of them in total. Some of them were on the Jiao Dragon list, and some of them didn't have 4-star combat strength but had 4-star potential. As for the Earth level members, there were relatively fewer of them. There were only about 30 of them. Most of them had 5-star combat strength and were the top geniuses on the Jiao Dragon list. A few of them had 5-star potential. As for the Heaven level members, there were less than 10 of them. Only one of them had 6-star combat strength but had 6-star potential. The others all had 6-star combat strength and were ranked in the top 10 of the Jiao Dragon list. The names of the Earth level members flashed through their minds. Indeed, there was no name like Chen Zong. This made them even more certain that this person was a new member. The tall young man who stopped Chen Zong was full of regret. He had offended an Earth level member. This wasn't a good thing. "Where's his refer?" a human level member asked curiously. Everyone looked around but didn't find anyone else. They were all surprised. As members of the Dragon Pavilion, they all knew the rules of the Dragon Pavilion. Without a recommendation, one couldn't participate in the assessment and couldn't become a member of the Dragon Pavilion. Since ancient times, even the children of the royal family had to abide by this rule. On the other hand, recommending an Earth-class pavilion member would give him 10 dragon teeth as a reward. Furthermore, he had a close relationship with that Earth-class pavilion member and was on the same side. While there might not be any benefits in a short period of time, in the long run, the rewards would be much greater than 10 dragon teeth. Such examples were not rare since the establishment of the Dragon Pavilion. Under normal circumstances, it should be the referrer who brought Chen Zong into the Dragon Pavilion and went to the 3rd floor. No matter how they racked their brains, they couldn't figure out the reason. The tall young man still looked a little uneasy. Chen Zong stepped onto the 3rd floor of the Dragon Pavilion. The area of the 3rd floor was smaller than the 2nd floor, but the layout of the hall was more exquisite. However, the style was the same as the 2nd floor, surrounded by dragons. There were also people in the hall of the 3rd floor, but there were fewer than the 2nd floor, only 6 or 7. Their sharp gazes pierced the air like swords and fell on Chen Zong's face, giving Chen Zong a trace of pressure. They were very strong. Chen Zong had a feeling that he was no match for any of these people. There was no fear. Instead, there was some excitement in the depths of his heart. Real martial artists, real geniuses, all became stronger when they met strong opponents. "Who are you?" One of them stood up and asked without any trace of politeness. Chen Zong took out the Earth-level dragon token. Everyone saw it clearly at a glance. They didn't doubt its authenticity because they believed that no one would dare to fake it. "So you're a new pavilion member. Chen Zong is your name, right?" "My name is Tong Gang." The person who asked suddenly smiled and said in a much better tone, "Where's your recommendation?" "I'm not in a good mood, so I left," Chen Zong said with a smile. Hearing Chen Zong's answer, everyone was stunned because they couldn't figure out why he was in a bad mood. Did he think that it was not enough to recommend an Earth-level pavilion member, and that it had to be a Heaven level? However, seeing that Chen Zong didn't have any intention to explain, they didn't ask further. "My name is Serene. My name is—" The people in the hall of the 3rd floor introduced themselves to Chen Zong one by one. After all, Chen Zong was an Earth-level pavilion member. This identity proved his talent and potential. There was no conflict between them and Chen Zong, so it was best to make friends with him. In the end, when the Dragon Pavilion was first established, it was to gather the top geniuses in the dynasty and use them as much as possible for the dynasty. As it developed, in addition to its original purpose, it gradually gave birth to other things, such as becoming a platform. It should be known that most of the pavilion members of the Dragon Pavilion came from very high backgrounds, such as the children of some large family. Each of them had their own resources and advantages, and each had their own areas of expertise. Sometimes there were some things that might not be easy to handle by oneself, so it was inevitable that the strength of others would be needed. The strength of the other pavilion members of the Dragon Pavilion would undoubtedly come in handy. After some discussion, Chernzong also learned about the identities of these people. Some were from the Marquis residence, some were even the sons of the Marquis, and some were the young masters of large families in the imperial city. Chapter 292. He didn't belong to the capital but had obtained the Earth-grade token of the Dragon Pavilion. Everyone knew what this meant. This meant that this person's actual potential could reach the Heaven grade, which meant that this person had a high possibility of reaching the 6-star level in the future. A top genius with 6-star level combat strength, no matter where he was, would be the target of everyone's flattery. Everyone was from big families and forces, and they were also outstanding top geniuses, so they naturally wouldn't flatter him. However, their attitudes were obviously more enthusiastic, and they even invited Chernzong to their homes. Chernzong also wouldn't pretend to be cold. He smiled and chatted with everyone, and at the same time, he learned more about the Dragon Pavilion through their mouth. There are indeed peerless Earth-grade cultivation methods and martial arts on the 5th floor, but they are all missing the last 2 or 1 layer, Tonggang said with a smile. Incomplete. Chernzong was a little speechless, and the anticipation and enthusiasm in his heart dissipated by a lot. Chernzong was interested in the peerless Earth-grade martial arts, especially the sword technique. However, if it was incomplete, its effect couldn't be compared to the complete martial art. Moreover, the price of a peerless Earth-class martial arts skill is very high. The second-level martial arts skill requires 500 dragon teeth, and the first-level martial arts skill requires 1,000 dragon teeth. Another Earth-class pavilion member laughed and said. Chernzong couldn't help but reveal a look of astonishment. 500 dragon teeth, 1,000 dragon teeth. This was too much. He had only received 10 dragon teeth when he became an Earth-grade pavilion member. The difference was huge. Apart from the reward for entering the pavilion, how do dragon teeth come about? Chernzong took the opportunity to ask. Haha, there are several main ways. Sometimes, the Dragon Pavilion will issue some missions, and completing the missions will give you dragon teeth as a reward. In addition, there are transactions between pavilion members. Finally, it's to offer treasures, cultivation methods, martial arts, and the like to the Dragon Pavilion. For example, if you have a peerless Earth-grade cultivation method or martial art that the Dragon Pavilion doesn't have, you can offer it to the Dragon Pavilion and get a generous amount of dragon teeth. Or you can offer a pseudo-spiritual weapon and get a generous amount of dragon teeth. Chernzong suddenly understood, but he wouldn't really give up his heavenly chaotic energy or dragon power bracelet. If the Dragon Pavilion had a complete peerless Earth-grade sword art, perhaps Chernzong would have offered up the chaotic heaven origin shattering force in exchange for a generous amount of dragon fangs in exchange for a complete peerless Earth-grade sword art. Unfortunately, the peerless Earth-grade martial arts in the Dragon Pavilion were not complete, so their appeal was not that high. As for the Dragon Power Bracelet, it could increase Chernzong's combat power by a small level in a short period of time. Unless there was something better, he would not give it away. At this time, a figure walked up to the 3rd floor. He had delicate features and bright eyes. He couldn't be described as handsome, but his facial features were pleasing to the eye. He wore a silver crown with a flood dragon on his head, indicating that he had an extraordinary background. On his body was a golden robe with a silver flood dragon embroidered on it. It was vivid and lifelike, and as the robe swayed, it looked as if it was about to fly. On his waist was a long sword. The head of the sword was a dragon's head, The hilt was a part of the dragon's body, and the scabbard was the latter part of the dragon's body. Overall, it looked like a long sword transformed from a flood dragon. The sword was silver gray in color, and its edges were gilded with gold. It looked luxurious. Chen Zong's eyes first swept across the man's face, and then fell on the sword. He was directly attracted to it, and he couldn't help but have a feeling that it was not an ordinary sword. "Your Highness, Second Prince." The moment they saw this person, everyone quickly got up and bowed, which surprised Chen Zong. His Highness, Second Prince. This person turned out to be the son of the Emperor of the Cloud Dragon Dynasty. How many times do I have to say it? Here, I am a member of the Dragon Pavilion, just like you. The second prince shook his head and smiled bitterly. His amiable attitude surprised Chen Zong. After all, no matter what, he was the son of the emperor. In the entire dynasty, he had an extremely high status. It was normal for him to have a high attitude when facing others, but now it was the opposite. Immediately, Chen Zong felt the second prince's gaze fall on his face. "Friend, you look very unfamiliar. Could you be a new member?" The second prince asked with a sincere smile. "Your Highness, as you said, Chen Zong is indeed an Earth Pavilion member who has just passed the assessment. He comes from the Mountain Overlook Commandery and is the disciple of the Mountain Overlook Marquis," Serene quickly said. A sharp light seemed to flash in the second prince's eyes, as if he wanted to see through Chen Zong. Because in that instant, he also thought of something, and that was the rules of the Dragon Pavilion's assessment. The disciple of the Mountain Overlook Marquis meant that this person was not from the capital, and the difficulty of the assessment would be raised by a level. An Earth Pavilion member meant that this person actually had the talent and potential of a Heaven Pavilion member. With a turn of his mind, the second prince instantly understood the mystery, and the smile on his face became more sincere. "My name is Yuan Yi." "Greetings, Brother Chen." The second Prince Yuan Yi actually cupped his fists to Chen Zong. Although Chen Zong did not feel flattered, he still had a rather special feeling. Cupping one's fists in salute was a kind of etiquette, and the feeling would be different depending on the other party's identity, and so on. The etiquette of a Qi and Blood Realm martial artist and a true Martial Realm martial artist would definitely give people a different feeling. The etiquette of an ordinary person and the etiquette of a prince and grandson would also give people a different feeling. "You're too polite, second prince." Chen Zong cupped his fists in return, neither servile nor overbearing. "Brother Chen, the second prince has a gentle temperament and is approachable. He's famous for being polite to the wise. You'll know if you get to know him more," Tonggang said with a smile. "You're flattering me too much." The second Prince Yuan Yi smiled and immediately looked at Chen Zong. "Since Brother Chen is a new Earth Pavilion member, and I just happened to meet you, it means that we're fated. I'll be the host and set up a table at the White Phoenix restaurant to welcome Brother Chen." Chen Zong was even more astonished. This was the first time he met the second prince, and yet the other party was so warm, courteous, and inviting him to a banquet. It was inevitable that Chen Zong would be wary. Perhaps, as Tonggang said, the second Prince Yuan Yi was approachable and courteous to the wise, but Chen Zong didn't believe that a prince of a dynasty would be so simple. At the same time, he remembered his master's instructions. Within the royal capital, the factions were tangled and complicated, so he had to be cautious. "You're too polite, second prince. It's just that I can't accept an undeserved reward," Chen Zong said. If the second prince was a narrow-minded person, then Chen Zong's answer had already offended him. However, when the second prince heard Chen Zong's words, he didn't get angry at all. Instead, he smiled. "Brother Chen, I'm inviting you to a banquet not only to welcome you, but also to become friends with you," Yuan Yi said frankly. "Perhaps Brother Chen just came from Linshan Commandery and doesn't know enough about the royal family. Father has 3 sons and I'm the second." Chen Zong listened quietly, and Tong Gang and the others didn't interrupt. "The next emperor of the Cloud Dragon dynasty will be one of us three brothers," the second prince continued. This sounded like a secret or taboo, but he said it without hesitation. Looking at Tong Gang and Zhou Renyi's expressions, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with it. Chen Zong continued to listen. Fighting within the same family is a taboo in the dynasty. No one is allowed to violate it, or the consequences will be severe. Whether it's my eldest brother, my third brother, or myself, we all want to become emperor, so the three of us must compete. And the way to compete is to display our own abilities. Second Prince Yuanyi's gaze swept across Tong Gang and the others before landing on Chen Zong's face. To become a qualified emperor, one's own abilities aren't the most important. The most important thing is to know how to use people and recruit capable people. Only in this way can the foundation of the dynasty be stabilized and the dynasty become more prosperous. Brother Chen, you're an Earth-rank cabinet member, which proves your talent and potential. Especially since you're not from the Imperial City, the difficulty of the examination has increased by a level. In other words, your talent and potential should have reached the heaven rank. Second Prince Yuan-Yi smiled and looked at Chen Zong with sincerity in his eyes. "This is why I want to befriend you. Of course, I'm not using you. I just hope that you can support me and make our dynasty stronger," Second Prince Yuan-Yi said. Whether it was his eyes or his attitude, they were very sincere, and everyone could feel his sincerity. Chen Zong didn't answer immediately. Instead, he quickly scanned Tong Gang and the others to check their expressions. However, he found that all of them looked normal, without a trace of surprise. It was as if this wasn't a secret, but something that everyone knew. This feeling made Chen Zong feel very strange. After all, when he was in the Eastern continent, Chen Zong had read some ancient books from the era of kingdoms. Many of the records were about the dark side of the three great kingdoms. In order to fight for the throne, brothers would resort to all kinds of schemes and tricks, and even disown their own family. When Chen Zong found out that the other party was the second prince, he also wondered if they would fight for power like the three great kingdoms of the Eastern continent. Many thoughts flashed through his mind, but second Prince Yuan-Yi still looked at Chen Zong, the sincerity in his eyes undisguised. "I'm indebted to the second prince for thinking so highly of me. It's my honor to be friends with your highness, but I can't guarantee that I can be of any help." Chen Zong thought for a moment, then replied neither quickly nor slowly. Since the second prince had already said so, if Chen Zong still refused, it would be very unappreciative. No matter how magnanimous the second prince was, he wouldn't be happy. At that time, it was hard to say whether he would bring some unnecessary trouble to his master, the Marquis of Linshan. However, Chen Zong hadn't decided whether to stay out of this or choose to side with him. This kind of answer was more neutral. It wouldn't offend the second prince, nor would it agree to become a member of the second prince's camp. A trace of regret flashed through the depths of the second prince's eyes. He really wanted to rope in Chen Zong and make him his right-hand man. In comparison, there weren't many Heaven Pavilion members in the Dragon Pavilion. Although Chen Zong was an Earth Pavilion member, he had the potential to become a Heaven Pavilion member. His future achievements would be extraordinary. However, Chen Zong didn't explicitly refuse. This meant that he still had a chance to recruit him, and now it was a good start. "Brother Chen, you can just call me by my name," Second Prince Yuan-Yi said with a smile. "Now, please move to the White Phoenix House. I believe that the delicacies of the White Phoenix House will make Brother Chen forget to return." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.